Three people stood on the edge of the cliff, and a tense atmosphere pulsed in the air. Around this place, the majestic eagle circled, carefully following what was happening below. Two cultivators with a grin said that in the next life he should be more careful. And now he has clearly contacted those people. The next moment, the guy felt a strong blow to his face. This was enough for him to lose his balance. The young hero was rapidly falling from a cliff, covered by increasing fear. The flight seemed endlessly long, but the eagle grabbed it in time, saved from the fall. After some time, he opened his eyes. His gaze radiated powerful vibrations of energy. This energy was transformed into a whirlwind, concentrating near the seal tower. The sect master took advantage of this, having passed a powerful transformation and, finally, awakened. Cultivators gathered in the hall, happy to congratulate him on a new breakthrough. However, a powerful chain unexpectedly escaped from the tower. The cloud of energy took the form of a terrible monster, from which the cultivators decided to hide inside the tower. Meanwhile, a huge flock of bats approaching their goal appeared in the sky. The mouse gathered near the dark Gothic castle where vampires ruled. Mr. Gluwad could not believe what was happening. 1,000 years passed, and some eastern inhabitants again broke through. It was urgent to collect all the nobility and make efforts in order to settle things with werewolves. Vladika ordered to protect the territory and prevent the tragedy like 1,000 years ago. At this time, in the western monastery, the young nun turned to God with a prayer for protection. The eagle continued to circle over the rock, destroying the stone with his powerful wing. He was having fun. His laughter spilled in the air, his breathing became light and free, and finally, he erected the foundation of his strength. This discovery allowed the young hero to feel ease and soar above the ground, seeing the world in new, bright colors. Suddenly, a loud voice was heard from one of the rocks, calling him by name. Switching rapidly, he saw in front of him an amazing translucent figure. The mentor noted that 2,000 years can take to build the foundation of the EU, and he added that the world could change by that time, and he will have to survive in chaos. He looked around puzzled and asked himself whether 2,000 years have passed since his last appearance. The young man thought about, spiritual energy here was much weaker than in solitude. The guy was absent only for 2 days, but 2,000 years passed outside. Having decided to check it on his own, he quickly went away. During the flight, he drew attention to several people below. Two men stood on the edge of the cliff. He wanted to know who they were and how they dared to create problems in the sect. Instead of an answer, one of them took out a gun and instructed him with a surprised hero. His partner took out a heavy crossbow, directing him to the young man. He easily detained shells in the air. These people did not have cultivation, and their weapons were clearly not from his time. He released 2 powerful shells from his hands, which immediately rushed to the opponents. 2 men felt an attack, but could not resist. They froze in place and fell unconscious. He was surprised. They simply died. 2,000 years ago, such a scratch would be considered a slight injury, but now people have become incredibly weak. The young hero looked at the other guy who was already dead. 2,000 years ago, such a scratch would be considered a minor injury. But now people can die even from this. Nearby, the phone rang. The name Jiang Xiaoru was displayed on the screen. Yi Wu was surprised to twist this strange device in his hands, raised his eyebrows and opened his eyes wide. There was a formidable voice from the tube, saying that Jiang Xiaoru would never marry such a village manor as he was. The guy retreated, stunned by what he heard. He thought. The device did not have spiritual energy, but could tolerate sounds by thousands of kilometers. Looking thoughtfully at the dead man, he decided to lend his appearance in order to better understand this world. He folded his hands and promised to arrange worthy funerals to the unfortunate. If the deceased had enemies, he vowed to avenge him if this did not cause complications. At this time, in a university city, Haizhou, outraged cries were heard on a trading street. The young lady was indignant why she should marry the grandson of the old man, only because he saved her parents. Jiang Xiaoru thoughtfully laid the phone and looked at her friend. Lin Jianxian laughed with a laugh that while she was in Haizhou, her parents will not be able to influence Jiang Xiaoru. The young lady replied that the engagement was arranged in honor of the grandfather who was seriously ill for the last year. Then the Master Yu said that this was connected with karma, and grandfather remembered the events of the past. The whole family pressed on her so that she would marry A Wu. But as soon as the beauty brings the miracle dode of Shui, who cured my grandfather, everything would change. Meanwhile, he was racing over the city thinking that the deceased guy had the same name as he. It may make sense to join the mysterious sect University Haizhou to understand this world. But the next moment, the guy felt an impending danger near him. As soon as he had time to dodge a huge flying boat, he took a breath, surprised at what had happened. A little girl flew with her mother on an airplane and said that there was a flying person nearby. But the woman objected, saying that the child just plays too much on fantasy. Iwu could not restrain his indignation why this flying boat did not distinguish spiritual energy. It seems that there are many powerful people in this world. The next moment, not calculating the trajectory, it crashed into the window of a small office. The young couple, seeing the unusual window washer, was incredibly outraged. Meanwhile, the young man rapidly began to fall down. After a few moments, he was on the soft earth and thought that flying so irresponsible is dangerous. An hour passed. The guy was lying on the ground, reflecting on his position, not understanding how to proceed. Suddenly, a terrible face of a huge wild beast appeared in front of him. Leo growled menacingly, opening his mouth, preparing to grab an uninvited visitor. The next moment, the little girl took off the mask and asked why the brother is lying here for so long. Perhaps he has no money. The young lady noticed that he was probably hungry, because her mother said that people do not move when they did not eat for a long time. He, getting the back of his head, got up and replied that he was just a little tired. He noticed that the child had no spiritual energy, which means she was an ordinary person. The flight to a short distance exhausted him more than the young cultivator expected. Until the guy reaches the stage of the emergence of the soul, he should listen to the teacher's advice and not lean out. Meanwhile, the girl drew attention to the worn clothes of the stranger. Deciding to help the poor man, she offered him a delicious free potato. Iwu, with a smile, invited her to eat together. The girl happily agreed. The cultivator could not believe that all this is happening in reality. This world turned out to be chaotic and unpredictable. Judging by the appearance of local girls, their clothes seemed to him very unusual. The pants were so short that he decided, in this world, there is clearly a shortage of fabric. Looking at the girl, he thought that the children remained as peaceful despite the difficulties. Suddenly in the distance was the alarmed voice of a woman calling a daughter by name. Madame came up and with concern asked where Yin disappeared, because she was so worried about her. Win rushed to her mother, and Awu advised the girl to be careful. The next moment, one of the men standing next to the woman resolutely approached Iwu and tried to hit him. The stranger grabbed the young man by the head, then clutched his hand with a dead grip. The man made a painful technique, and he was numb for a moment. The guy arrogantly noticed that he was unexpectedly attacking dishonestly, concentrating energy. He made a sharp breakthrough forward. With a sharp movement, he threw the enemy aside and left him far behind. His feet glided easily and smoothly on the ground. Each step was reflected in the earth by vibration. The woman asked what was happening, and why Hugh began a fight without understanding the situation. Yin enthusiastically slammed her hands and said that the brother was very strong. The girl explained that she had found a guy lying on the ground and offered him food. Madame ordered a Hu to apologize to the young man because he did nothing wrong. The man approached, apologized, and explained that he was just worried about the young lady. The girl's mother thanked Wu for looking after her daughter and handed him a small envelope as a sign of gratitude. At that moment, a black car drove up, and the driver said that you can sit down. Yin went to a new friend and shook his hand in parting. He was regretfully realized that this child has a strange disease, but this can be easily fixed. He rummaged in his pockets and took out the candy, holding it out to the girl. With a soft smile, the guy added that if she becomes bad, this sweet will help. After a moment, they waved to each other goodbye, and the girl got into the car. The driver reminded the hostess that the recording of the miraculous Droth Shu is scheduled for now, and if you hurry, you can have time. Madame noticed an unusual candy in the hands of her daughter and offered to throw her away, but Yin asked to leave her for herself and play a little with her. The woman graciously resolved, hoping that the daughter's illness would end soon, and the miraculous dator could cure her. Suddenly, the girl felt strange and froze for a few seconds. The next moment, the baby began to fall forward. Her mother screamed in a panic. The woman asked the Hugh to hurry and deliver them to the doctor as soon as possible. The girl was lying in the back seat and suddenly remembered the words, Iwu, that if she became bad, you need to eat a pill. Soon, the car drove up to the modest hut of Dr. Sue, covered with thick trees. This healer was known for his gift, to treat people with the help of a divine touch. The doctor, who was engaged in his notes, was suddenly alert when he heard the approaching steps at the entrance. An alarmed woman entered the room, holding her weakened daughter in her arms and begged for help. Zhu asked Madame Wang not to panic and assured him to treat the sick, his duty. The old man put the girl on the couch and carefully examined her condition. A few minutes later, the doctor with a heavy sigh said that he could not help. and advised him to prepare for the worst. These words stunned Madame Wang. Her hopes for recovery of her daughter collapsed in a moment, and tears poured out of her eyes with a stream. The woman fell to her knees and prayed to the doctor to save her precious child. For this, she was ready to sacrifice her own life. She, thinking a little, said that the only thing you can do is to alleviate the suffering of the girl. Only the restorative pill of 9 revolutions, the recipe of which was lost 2,000 years ago. The girl lay on the couch, and suddenly the candy that she gave her began to exude a marvelous aroma. The doctor caught this smell. He had half of the old pill recipe, and for a moment he wondered if it was possible to restore it. Looking at the luminous candy that fell out of his hands, Wei realized that its shape and aroma coincide with a description in ancient texts. This was their only chance of salvation, and it was impossible to lose it. The healer neatly took the pill in his hands, carefully studying its shape and a delicate aroma that resembled an ancient divine medicine. Madame Wang was amazed. She remembered how she met a young man who gave this candy, saying that she could help her daughter. He muttered thoughtfully that it could be the same restoring pill. These words returned the unfortunate mother the hope that the daughter will nevertheless recover and recover. But unexpectedly, Sue smiled barely noticeably, because the appearance of a magic medicine here is clearly not core. The doctor raised his hands to the sky and said what divine intervention is, a rarity that few can boast of. The old man suggested that the young man who gave this pill may be a divine being descending to the earth to test human life. After the procedure, the doctor warned that the girl needed peace to restore. Madame Wang thanked him with tears in her eyes. But the healer replied that it was not him to thank him, but to the young man who gave the pill. Zue asked Madame Van to show him that mysterious young man, because he would not calm down until he recognized his secret, but the woman did not know where to find him. The guy, having noticed Yin's disease, gave her a medicine. The thought that the pill could be thrown away made her shudder. Hu suggested going to the University Haizhou, where they first met a young man. He may study there. The woman supported this idea and said that I need to immediately go to the university to find this guy and thank him. The doctor thought that the young man probably hidden in the guise of a student. He decided to help keep the personality of this person secret. Madame Wang. I also thought that a guy who is ready to calmly give a pill of the highest grade cannot be an ordinary person. Their family should strengthen this relationship. Meanwhile, A Wu walked along the lively street of the city when the phone rang in his pocket again. Since his last call, the device has been silent for a long time, but now it came to life again. At the other end of the wire, they reported that the people sent after him had lost a trace. But the head of the village found out about his arrival in Hizhou. The voice on the phone was painfully familiar. He was in surprise, raised his eyebrows. From the tube, it was reported that Aunt Zhou is now in Haizhou and invites him to dinner. The guy's lips trembled, his eyes filled with tears. The memories of the past flashed in his memory. This voice reminded him of the teacher's wife, who spent a lot of time with him since childhood. The young man promised to come for dinner and, still impressed, completed the conversation. At first, he met a guy with the same name, and then he heard a voice, so similar to the voice of the mentor's wife, whether it was just a coincidence or part of something more. Before leaving, the mentor left things that were stored in Van Baolu owned. Perhaps you can find answers there. With these thoughts, he went to Villa Zhangyunhua, where, according to his information, there should have been Aunt Zhou. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiaoer rode on llama with her friend and discussed the upcoming parish of A Wu, whom my mother invited. Lin Jianzian noticed that none of the guys could compare with Zheng Sun. Zhang Xiaoru energetically shook her friend, recalling that this guy, president of the student council of the University of Hyde and the leading athlete of the school. Their skirmish was interrupted by a stranger who suddenly appeared at the gate and asked if his Aunt Zhou was at home. This guy at least looked pretty, but dressed too easily. Therefore, Zhang Xiao decided not to go out. The girl came up with the idea of calling King Leo to scare the uninvited guest. Lin Jianzian warned that Leo could harm him, but the young mistress only laughed and released a wild beast. The lion rushed to the stranger with a growl, menacingly gritting his teeth and drowning his claws. But the young mistress indicated the right direction with who should be taught to teach. The beast raced at an incredible speed, jumping forward with a growl. But he remained absolutely calm, stood calmly, and did not move. Even when the lion approached and opened his terrible mouth, the young man bravely held on. Zhang Xiaoer watched what was happening with anxiety, not looking away from the place of the fight. However, contrary to expectations, he simply leaned over and stroked the animal. The guy expected that mountain gods or demons would be found in these places, and here is an ordinary dog. Suddenly, Steps were heard behind him. Turning around, he saw a woman with a joyful smile. She greeted him and immediately found out in front of her was Yu Wu. The guy was puzzled. In front of him was a woman who looked like his teacher's wife. This circumstance was confused. The woman noticed his embarrassment and gently reminded that he could call her Aunt Jo, as it was in childhood. Wu noted her amazing resemblance to the teacher's wife. She had the same voice and even facial features. While he was thinking, Zhang Xiaoer ran up to the woman and happily hugged his mother. The girl said that the stranger invaded their territory and attacked the king of Leo and described him in the most unflattering expressions. However, the woman gently hit her daughter, gently scolded for rudeness. She recalled that when Zhang Xiaoru was small, she constantly ran after Wu, calling him Wu Gei. The girl was surprised to find out that this guy was her old acquaintance, and added that as a child, Zhang Xiaoer even played the house and stated that she would marry him. Having said this, the woman hastened to go into the house, reminding that she had a lot of things. Zhang Xiaoer greeted with a smile, but she turned away with obvious discontent and walked away. The girl warned him not to get closer and emphasized that if not for her mother, she would not have recognized him at all. For some time he stood in thought. Every smile and look of his Aunt Jo reminded him of the teacher's wife. He decided that he would treat them as his family. Having made this decision, the young man went further, after the young named sister, but suddenly I felt a powerful stream of sinister energy under my feet. At first it seemed incredible, but then the guy realized that he was feeling the trace of the bone demon of blood yin. He figured that the formation began about 18 years ago, relatively recently. This was an attempt to take the strength of the family of his teacher and also force his whole family to suffer. However, the one who started this process did not even know the foundations. Therefore, everything is not so complicated. Wu decided that if there are the same people behind this as 2,000 years ago, they will not be a problem for him. Zhang Xiaoru, noticing his confusion, suggested that for a village guy, everything that happened looks incredible. Wu silently agreed that this is true. This area hides many secrets in itself. The girl suggested telling him the story of this building, which was truly impressive. It turned out that 18 years ago, her grandfather invited the master Feng Shui, who changed the energy of the earth here. Soon the economy began to collapse, and rich people began to settle in the area. He thought, holding a leaf in his hands, this master Feng Shui was clearly very strong, despite his doubts about such practices. He still decided to take into account this information. Meanwhile, the girl continued the story. She added that after changing the energy of the earth, her grandfather suddenly fell ill, and the master saved him. He frowned, recalling that 18 years ago he himself changed the energy of the earth. The coincidence seemed suspicious. Perhaps this master Feng Shui was involved in what was happening. Behind them, there was a voice of a servant who said that dinner was ready. He invited the mistress and Master Yi to the table. The young girl went to the entrance with a magnificent gait, while the guy was left behind. Wu thought that perhaps everything would work out over time. He decided to be kinder for this family because his teacher's wife was always an example of care and tenderness for him. After lunch, Zhang Xiaoer fell on the bed, feeling terrible fatigue. She said that he was an intriguer who flattered her mother at the dining table. He probably had hidden motives. Lin Jianxian offered to stay away from the house and join the scientific team of Professor Van. Then Jiang Xiaoer could not return home for 6 months. The girl considered this an excellent idea. She was going to contact the professor and agree on joining his team, after which she planned to give the servants a vacation and leave one in the house. A friend doubted a little in this regard, recalling that the service of the villa costs a lot of money, and it is difficult to imagine where the village land will find such funds. And outside the window in the meantime, he said goodbye to the Aunt Jo, escorting her to the car. He handed her a family pill, saying that her properties would help Grandfather Yang. Wu opened the car door in order to skip the lady. Madam thanked him, got into the car and waved goodbye. The guy decided that tomorrow he would go to the University of Haizhou. When the car disappeared from sight, he went back to the house. Suddenly, the young hero felt an approaching danger. It was the intention of the murder. Several strong guys found Yunhua Villa and were going to complete the task. They hoped to kill him and get their reward. This time they should kill the guy. You just need to wait a bit in the shelter. Soon people went down to the ground. Wu already felt the presence of enemies even before they approached. The attackers rushed forward. Their steps merged into a single rhythm, and in their eyes the greedy fire of hunting on their victim was burning. Wu rushed to run away with all his strength that he only had. The leader squeezed a long knife in his hands. whose blade sparkled ominously, creating frightening reflections, and was preparing to deliver a crushing blow. And the next moment, a cruel enemy deftly threw a dagger in his direction. Feeling the danger, the young man rushed forward rapidly, trying to leave the attack, but the knife whistled in the air and almost hit his shoulder. The rest of the men also armed themselves with knives and began to surround it with coherently. Everyone waved, preparing to stick the weapon into the target. The young man was in the ring of opponents. Their evil views left no doubt about the intention to kill him at all costs and complete his task. The hero stood, pondering the next step, tensely analyzing the situation, realizing that the only mistake could be the last for him in this deadly game. Terrible mercenaries noticed that in EU it was not enough for the courage to kill anyone right in the territory of Haizhou. They came to the conclusion that the best way out for the young man was immediately surrendering. One of the villains sarcastically stated that he looked too scared and pale to be considered an adult. The man offered him two options, or kneel down or commit suicide. With a smug grin, the criminal continued to voice his conditions. But suddenly the young man disappeared, forcing others to look around with perplexity. It was so unexpected that one of the minions even thought that the enemy simply evaporated, the leader thought. The one who was able to kill his two best fighters should have outstanding power. Realizing that the enemy could be dangerous, he ordered his people to divide and search the forest, looking into every crevice and secluded place. The sudden disappearance alerted the criminals. The leader decided to use the secret device to track the fugitive. However, looking at the device, he was in amazement that the arrow indicates him directly at him. The leader felt the chill ran down his back. Behind the really stood in the scarlet light in the palm of his hand. The next moment, the young man rapidly struck a powerful blow, knocking the enemy out of balance and forcing him to collapse to the ground. Everything happened so quickly that the offender did not even have time to realize that he was trapped. He was leaning over a defeated enemy and demanded to explain who sent mercenaries and for what reason they hunted him. The boss was furious. Realizing that his people were also captured, they did not manage to escape or transmit information. He thought with anxiously that the abilities of this young man are superior to the level of many martial artists. It is probably better to hide this failure and not tell anyone. Suddenly, the leader seized a fit of severe pain. He grabbed his chest, feeling the body paralyzed. His subordinates began to choke and cough with blood, being under the influence of magical power. He watched what was happening with icy calm, toxic suicide, the last step of a well-trained detachment. Not every day you can meet such dangerous opponents. With a sigh, the young man thought that he would have to train even more. These killers were clearly not from the simple, but their employer, a real criminal genius. But first, it was necessary to go to the university. He was collected magical energy and smoothly rose to his feet. Having waved his hand, he left a flash of a magic charge behind him. The guy decided that he was becoming a student of the sect. He would be able to deeply understand the secrets of this era. Meanwhile, a group of people gathered in a dark corridor with tightly closed doors. Their boss thoughtfully said that it was urgent to find out the location of the black group, since there were no news from them for too long. Having checked the information, the subordinate said that the signs of life in 5 people from the black group have disappeared. This could only mean one thing: they were all dead. And the reason for their death remained a mystery. According to data obtained from the drone, traces of struggle were discovered at the place of their disappearance. But no other evidence was found there. The commander frowned, feeling a flash of rage. Such a turn of events was completely unacceptable for him. He stood up sharply, pounding his fist on the table, and fell on his subordinates with an angry tirade, accusing them of stupidity and inability to cope with the task. In fear, the men stepped back. But a powerful magical ejection of force made them shake. The captain cast a harsh look at the team and ordered immediately to find someone more suitable who could finish this work. At this time, he had already arrived at the university. He quickly got out of the bus, looking around the noisy streets of the new world. The young man thought that his current level of force could well protect him in this world, but did not expect that the weapons of ordinary mortals would be so dangerous. Having decided to hide his abilities temporarily, he understood that a clash with iron monsters and iron snakes could end deplorable. Suddenly, a man passed by him, who suddenly staggered and almost fell. Yiwu immediately stopped abruptly and noticed that he needed urgent assistance. However, other passers-by indifferently warned that it was probably a fraudster, and it is better not to approach a young man. Yiwu could not believe that people in this world became so cold and indifferent to someone else's trouble. Remembering the words of a teacher who always spoke about the importance of helping the weak, He decided to follow this covenant. The young man took out a healing pill and handed it to the man. Probably he can consider himself a lucky one since he was so lucky. The gentleman sat leaning against the wall and gradually came to his senses, feeling a healing effect. After that, he continued his way, having finally throwing the girl from the crowd a remark that people should be kinder to each other. A man who became ill was sitting for a while but already felt better. Suddenly, the subordinate came up to him and whispered something. The patient abruptly opened his eyes, and a strange light flashed in his gaze. The subordinate asked with anxiously how his master feels. Hearing the answer, he calmly calmed down. He suddenly felt relief. The man said that until recently he was on the verge of fainting, but someone gave him an amazing pill. Waking up, he realized that he was completely healthy, as if never had a miracle. Such a miracle should not be left without a reward. Despite the fact that the benefactor did not name his name, the man firmly decided to find him and thank him for kindness. Meanwhile, the bright sun shone over the University of Haizhou. The swallows of fun fluttered in the air. Jiang Xiaoru sighed with relief, telling her friend that she was finally able to escape from the annoying village. Lin Yanxian noticed that today a new student will appear in their class, and with a smile added that she hopes to see a handsome man. After a few moments, the teacher entered the office and asked students to calm down to get acquainted with the newcomer. The woman introduced a new student, and Jiang Xiaoru seemed to be familiar. The girls were talking quietly, assuming that this guy just looked like Yiwu. The teacher suggested that a new one introduce herself and thus get acquainted with the class. The young man calmly said that his name is Yi Baixin, deciding to use this name. Jiang Xiaoru said that she likes the guys who remain cold and say little. Lin Yanxian teased her friend with a smile, noting that she was still in love with her high school student, and offered to leave the new one to her. Meanwhile, the teacher wondered where to plant a new student. Jiang Xiaoru thought, although they both had the surname Yi, but his name sounded better. Lin Yanxian raised her hand, offering a free place next to her. The woman turned to Jiang Xiaoru and asked what she thinks about this. The girl, a little embarrassed, admitted that she wanted to sit next to the newcomer. As a result, the teacher allowed to choose a place for himself where it would be more convenient for him. The guy walked along the desk, as if going to sit next to Lin Yanxian. The young lady was very delighted, but unexpectedly, he made a completely different decision. At the last moment, the guy chose a completely unfamiliar girl and sat next to her, leaving everyone slightly surprised. A friend of Xu Shanya noticed that Jiang Xiaoru was clearly interested in the newcomer. Yiwu furtively looked at the new desk neighbor. The girl met his gaze a little embarrassed. When the lesson ended, the students began to disperse. Wu also went out. But in the corridor, the young man ran into a group of arrogant guys. One of them, with a smug grin, stated that at the university, Haizhou was studying Ju, the one who is better not to cross the road. One of the hooligans came closer and, waving his finger in front of the nose of Yiwu, warned him to stay away from Jiang Xiaoru. Yiwu calmly promised not to even look in her direction and go around 1,000 kilometers. The guy thought that this Ji Shan was too self-confident and decided to teach him a little less, concentrating a magic fireball in his palm. The spell quickly flew towards anything unsuspecting Ji Shan. After a moment, the guys recently laughed, screamed in a panic, begging him to rather put out the glowing hair. The young man slowly went out into the street, striking along the sidewalk and reflecting on recent events. He came to the conclusion that half of his strength is already quite sufficient to protect, because why try to seem strong in a world where almost no one has cultivation? Suddenly, he decided that the best way to understand this era, go to the library and read books about the modern world. Meanwhile, Lin Yanxian noted that the guy ignored her invitation, choosing a place next to Yu Tin. She in irony suggested that he clearly had no taste. Suddenly, the girl saw Wu on the street and decided that he might want to talk to one of them. The young man noticed the girls but continued to go forward, completely not wanting to start the conversation. The bird soared high in the sky, slowly dissecting the air with powerful waves of wings. Suddenly, a tiny gift broke from under her tail, rapidly overcame the distance, and with a quiet slap landed directly on his boot. The young man irritably lowered his eyes. He clearly did not expect this, but it would be wrong to go in this form. Jiang Xiaoru was amazed to notice how the guy crouched on one knee. This brought her into confusion. Lin Yanxian enthusiastically stated that the guy probably wants to admit his friend in love. The embarrassed Jiang Xiaoru hastily left, saying that she was too young for a relationship. Yiwu thoughtfully looked at the trail of a bird gift, deciding that the girls understood him completely wrong. He had no flower to make confessions. At this time, Ji Shan, with rage, hit the table with his fist, No one had yet dared to humiliate him like that. He was boiling with anger. Yu, who begged for mercy, now brazenly flirts with Jiang Shar. It was unthinkable. The guy earned punishment. Dark personalities lurked in the shade, watching every step of the young hero. The library where he headed was too crowded, so they decided to wait for the right moment. Jishan, holding a sharp knife in his hands, swore gloomily that he would deal with Yi Wu, who would never dare to approach his goddess. Meanwhile, he was in the library studying books on cultivation methods. It seemed to him that in 2,000 years they had become too complicated. Suddenly, the young man noticed the ancient symbols on the doors. They seemed surprisingly familiar to him, exuding the powerful aura of antiquity. These inscriptions could indicate texts about the methods of cultivating the level of Yuan In or Hua Xin. The girls giggled, watching this strange young man. They decided that the guy was funny, since he went to read ancient texts. But their laughter was interrupted by a sudden master in a strict suit, attracting attention with his seriousness. The library reigned stressful silence, broken by a strict voice of Professor Vang, who ordered to comply with the rules. This place was intended for reading, and not for conversation and empty laughter. The professor came to prepare for his project and find ancient documents when he noticed that the archive door was open. The guard embarrassedly admitted that he had come out for a short while and lost sight of the offender. At this time, he was enthusiastically considering ancient books. He found a damaged text about the varieties of fistfight. But before he could read, the guard appeared and demanded to immediately leave the room. The man said that a simple student has nothing to do among ancient manuscripts, which even Professor Wang does not fully understand. However, to the surprise of everyone, the professor stopped the guard. Wang carefully looked at the young man. His face seemed very familiar, but the professor could not remember where he saw him. But after a moment, the teacher reproduced in his memory that morning when he suddenly became ill. The professor once again carefully looked at this unusual student. This guy reminded him of the same benefactor who gave him a wonderful pill. Making sure of his guess, he ordered the guard to apologize to Yi Wu. The security guard, dangling his head, tried to make excuses but was forced to apologize. The guard immediately drew attention to the student who behaved too defiantly and violated the orders. The rest of the students crowded around, in anticipation of how this tense scene will end. But suddenly the professor suggested checking whether he could read the ancient text. Yi Wu realized that he was in a difficult situation, but was not going to lose his face. Having carefully read the text, he slowly ran his gaze along the lines and tried to catch every detail. When the guy began to read aloud, a soft blue light thickened around him, confidently describing the technique of combat techniques. The young man intuitively recreated the missing fragments. Professor Wang listened with wide eyes and could not believe it. Each word EO coincided with his research, but even Wang himself did not achieve such accuracy. Others began to shut down, realizing that the young man really reads ancient documents. When Yi Wu turned around and saw how everyone was talking, he asked what was happening and why everyone was so alarmed. At that moment, the professor staggered as if he was going to faint. He recognized in him a man who recently gave a pill. Logic suggested that after taking the pill, an ordinary person becomes stronger than the elephant. The young man quickly guessed that the professor was pretending to be weak to lure another pill from him. Having decided not to delay the situation, he referred to urgent affairs and hastily left the library. Professor Wang called the guard and asked what book this strange student took. The guard handed him the red book with the name Pignon with Me. The professor looked at the book with surprise. Perhaps this student possessed hidden intentions. If he took such a simple book, he decided to study it himself in order to understand what he had conceived. Meanwhile, the young man went outside. It seemed to him that someone was watching him. The sensation of increasing anxiety was too clear to ignore it. Suddenly, he realized that several groups were hunting for him at once. This was clearly not a simple coincidence. The guy smiled rather, realizing that this was a good moment to start the game. He felt that it was time to have a little fun. A little time passed, and dark twilight sank into the sky. The thickening darkness filled the streets with a cold wind and strange silence. Yi Wu, looking impatiently, called the criminals who all this time followed him and offered to take a break. His voice sounded calm, but he felt a hidden threat. The bandits looked at each other and could not understand how they were opened so quickly. Perhaps this guy really had unusual abilities. Zhu Shan, waving a dagger, rushed forward, screaming that it was time to end this insolent. However, before he managed to strike, something unexpected happened. Another group suddenly attacked them. Unknown people in masks quickly went down, preparing for a decisive blow. Frightened Jishan turned around in horror, realizing that he himself was a victim of an attack. One of the attackers jumped on Chu Shanya, trying to hit him with his foot. Jishan barely managed to dodge, but did not have time to leave in time and received a powerful attack, from which he flew far ahead. He watched what was happening in surprise. He tried to understand who these people were, because they pursued him since he left the university. Perhaps their attacks would never end. The bandits demanded that he return some things to them, but the guy did not even understand what is being discussed. Keeping calm, the young hero grunted and looked around his opponents. And after a moment, he rose into the air and began to soar above the ground, avoiding attacks. In vain, the villain intended to hit the young man with a knife. He did not succeed at all. One of the bandits in a mask shouted to his people in order to stop the young man at all costs. However, the next moment of the chain from magical energy closed around the attackers. Yi-Wu raised his hand, and the bright light illuminated his face. He contemptuously looked at his constrained enemies. The guy calmly stated that the man standing behind the attack on the villa of Yunhua probably wanted to destroy the entire family of his teacher. Until this moment, he was thinking about how to break their plan, but today, the bastards themselves came to him. It was the right moment to use them in their interests. The young man released a magic weapon down. The energy poured sharply to its intended purpose, and with lightning speed she fell on the skeleton, which immediately flashed with bright light. Without turning around, he went away. Behind him, a bright, fiery flame flared up, illuminating the gloomy street. At this time, the gray-haired sorcerer felt that his magical formation was destroyed. He breathed heavily, not believing in what was happening. The next second, the man turned around. A student named Elan said that you need to immediately go to Haijo and find out what happened there. The magician in a dark suit soared over the city, anxiously examining the surroundings. He saw that the battlefield was destroyed and suggested that the striker destroyed all the witnesses. Meanwhile, he was walking along a busy street, enjoying the evening air. Suddenly he sneezed and thought with a smile that perhaps someone beautiful now remembers him. A short guy with a mustache was walking towards E, and therefore, a collision accidentally occurred. A strange passerby crashed into a young man. The next moment, the guy fell to the ground and Yi-Wu looked in surprise at the sudden man. The fat man rose silently and did not even bother to apologize for what had happened. He looked arrogant and lurked his inner rage due to an unexpected collision. Suddenly, the stranger accelerated, waved his hand and quickly ran forward. It seemed that his actions were too strange for a simple passerby. Feeling how his pockets were suddenly cut, he was aware that this guy was not a simple person. This is an impudent thief that stole his wallet, in which there should have been a lot of money. However, to the great disappointment of the thief, the wallet was empty. The guy, whose name was Zhang Jiven, was angry with himself for in vain he spent time and effort. Later, in the male hostel of the university, Haijo, he walked to his room and knocked on the door. Behind the wall there was a question who was there, but the guy did not have time to answer as the door opened. A moment later, on the threshold, the same thief appeared on the threshold. He immediately recognized him and was a little surprised at such a coincidence. For several minutes they looked at each other. The neighbor looked a little embarrassed. He was confused and squinted at the young man, but Yi-Wu decided to pretend that nothing happened. In the end, they had to live together in the same room. Introducing himself, a second-year student of philosophy, he smiled amiably and explained that he was determined precisely in this hostel. Zhang Jiven, learning that this guy was now his neighbor, felt incredible shame for his act. He decided that he needed to somehow make amends. Having examined the room with curiosity, he noted that the student dormitories of the 21st century looked like that. Everything around seemed quite interesting to him. To brighten up the acquaintance, Zhang Jiven suggested going for dinner. Soon, the guys ended up on a terrace near a university cafe and sat at a table waiting for their dish. Suddenly, Wu Tin approached them, saying that the meat was ready. She looked in surprise at Wu, not expecting to meet him so late here. The young man was also slightly surprised and asked why she worked so late. Wu Tin replied that she was earned in this cafe, and a shadow of sadness flashed in her eyes. Meanwhile, at the next table, the formidable man called the waitress in displeasure, demanding an explanation of why the fish is not yet ready. When the girl politely apologized, the man said that apologies are useless. With contempt in her voice, he invited her to go to the hotel with him. The young lady was slightly scared, but she repeated her words that she needed to wait a bit. The food was almost ready. Rising, the insolent approached the waitress, obviously intending to demonstrate his superiority. The bastard grabbed Wu Tin by the hand, saying that everyone respects him, and she apparently decided to neglect it. Yiwu calmly got up and decided to intervene to put the impudent in place. The young man resolutely grabbed the girl by the hand and dragged her away from the rude, standing between them. The scoundrel frowned and sharply asked what was happening here. Perplexing how this young man dared to interfere in his affairs, Jang Jivan advised his friend not to get excited and just call the police, but he firmly replied that Wu Tin was his classmate, and he could not just sit back and observe. Jang laughed at, saying that this guy himself asked for a showdown. Several bandits headed to Yao. Flexing his fists, Jang Jivan in a panic grabbed the phone, deciding to call the police until his new neighbor got to the fullest. Meanwhile, one of the attackers waved a bottle and sharply rushed forward into the attack. But he remained completely calmly waiting for the attacked attacker. The next moment, the bottle was right in the face of Yiwu, and it seemed that it was impossible to avoid a blow. However, something incredible happened. The bandit opened his eyes widely from amazement, not believing what happened. He was a sharp blow to the fist through the enemy back. The power of this blow was so great that there were several other bandits standing nearby. Jang Jivan froze, watching what was happening. He could not understand how his neighbor did so easily with a whole group of attackers. Wu Tin also could not believe her eyes. Her classmate, whom she considered an ordinary student, suddenly turned out to be a master of martial arts. Zhang Yu, furious with such a turn of events, could not restrain his rage. The villain's eyes sparkled with anger, and he stated that it was so easy not to intimidate. He approached A Wu, holding the knife ready, and threateningly said that he would prepare for death, hinting that she would not be easy. But the guy with amazing ease knocked out a knife out of his hand. The puzzled bastard fell to his knees and hastily began to apologize for his behavior. Wu Tin was still in shock but thanked her classmate for salvation. Zhang Jivan enthusiastically admitted that he was really cool. Yiwu looked up at heaven and noted that it was too late, and it was time to go home. The guy suggested holding Wu Tin home, and the girl happily agreed, admitting that she was still a little scary. Gradually, trembling in the body of Wu Tin subsided, and she began to tell her story. They slowly walked around the city at night. The girl shared that her mother was sick and needs medicines, so she had to not only study, but also earn extra money, although she did not expect to get into such an unpleasant situation. He realized that Wu Tin was very vulnerable and decided that in the future he would definitely help her. The guy fell behind a little, immersed in thought. Wu Tin turned around and asked what happened. The young man replied that he was just distracted, but in fact, he felt a strange aura emanating from afar, but decided not to say anything to the girl so as not to scare her. They soon approached her house. Suddenly, he again felt a powerful, concentrated spiritual energy that came from this place. It was very strange. In the 21st century, spiritual energy was a rarity, but there was unexpectedly a lot of it. The young man decided that it was worth investigating this and finding out more about what is happening here. At this moment, a gust of wind brought a piece of paper to him. There was a curious record on it, and its content clearly carried important information. The next day, Shushan with a gang of my friends was stupid when he went to the toilet. The unsuspecting guy was trapped. The bandits prepared a bag to attack him. In the next seconds, the bag was on the head of it, and the bastard swung batons preparing to beat him. Loud screams came from the school bath, who attracted the attention of people on the street. Some stopped, listening to what was happening. The beaten Jishan, barely restraining tears, begged for mercy. He swore that he would never do that again. But Yiwu believed that a simple apology is not enough. When the bandit asked what he wanted in return, he was leaning over him with a smug smile. Even more frightening, the unfortunate Jishan, trembling with fear, offered 1,000 won, hoping that this was enough, but in response he received another blow. The guy hit the bastard with force. Did he really think that he was in front of him? The bandit screamed that he was ready to pay more. If only they stopped hitting him. A, leaning towards him, arrogantly said that he would take 10,000. Stunned by Jishan could not believe his ears. But he realized that he had no choice. Soon, the content of the Wu left the room. He thought that modern people were still using wallets and wondered if there were enough 100,000 to rent a house. Jizhan told his friends that smart people were not looking for problems. He advised everyone to forget about what had happened. To begin with, according to him, they need to treat wounds and then think about how best to take revenge on this insolent. Meanwhile, in the lesson, the teacher said that they have a new topic. He said to his girlfriend that he noticed an ad on the door of Wu Tin, from whom he realized that her family was looking for tenants. He became interested and told the girl that he would like to rent housing, adding that he even has money for payment. Wu Tin was embarrassed and lowered her eyes, not knowing how to answer. The teacher, seeing that the guy was distracted and did not listen to her, was indignant. She threw it with chalk at him, and a piece of chalk hit him right in the head. He calmly noticed that the teacher's health is clearly out of order. He said that her yin and yang were unbalanced, and she needed to take the medicine. The teacher arrogantly asked what he meant, and how he dared to say this. When Wu wanted to explain, she interrupted him and angrily demanded that he immediately leave the class. The guy did not argue and escalate the situation even more, so he dutifully rose. Saying goodbye, the young man asked Wu Tin to leave the room for him, adding that he was going to study in the library. The teacher sighed heavily and continued the lesson with the rest of the students. Suddenly, her phone rang a cheerful melody. At the other end of the line was Professor Van. The woman was in shock. Such an important person rarely called personally. The professor said that he needs a student named Bachin to invite him to a joint project. Having finished the conversation, the teacher turned to the class with the question of who this one. Wu Tin raised her hand and reported that the teacher Q literally just kicked this student out of the class. The woman froze for a moment, realizing that the student whom she so recklessly put out the door turned out to be exactly those whom Professor Wang was looking for. The clumsy of herself for a rash act, the teacher hastened to go out into the corridor, thinking about how to correct the situation now. At this time, he was in the library and enthusiastically studied local literature, not even suspecting what happened. Teacher Q, loudly clutching heels, hurried down the corridor. She breathed heavily, feeling how much she was tired while she was running. Noticing her appearance, the young man turned around in surprise and asked what brought her here at the height of the lessons. The woman, overcoming embarrassment, apologized for her words. It was quite awkward for her, but she recognized her mistake. The teacher explained that Professor Wang personally wants to invite Wu to participate in the project. Anyone whom he notes, undoubtedly, has an outstanding talent. The young man listened with light bewilderment, assuming that there was an error. He did not understand why such attention was paid to him. However, the teacher persistently advised him to go to the historical museum in the East. But the calm and indifference of the guy to such a proposal seemed amazing to her. But he only calmly said that for starters, he wanted to read the book, after which perhaps he would think about it. Meanwhile, in the hospital, friends of Ji Shani bandaged wounds and discussed further plans. One of his friends asked what their boss was going to do. Ji Shan confidently replied that he knows the leader of the local street. He plans to call him for a showdown and teach a lesson. Suddenly, they saw how the Wu measured step passed by the hospital. Ji Shan, noticing him, smiled joyfully. He decided that now is the time to implement his plan. A few minutes later, he dialed a familiar number and contacted Mr. Young, asking him for help. Hearing the name Wu, Zhang immediately agreed to help. His interest increased noticeably when he found out who needed to be stopped. Soon, Jung sharply pressed the gas. Now the moment has come to act, and his minions, not having time to prepare, rapidly collapsed on the asphalt. Meanwhile, Wu was surprised to look around in search of the Museum of History. Jishan called the guy and said that he had stolen 100,000 from him and just wanted to escape, but he would pay for his actions. With a mockery, he suggested that probably the guy was not enough, and he wants to experience the taste of defeat again. However, the enemy laughed and said that he had only once hit him, and this does not mean at all that he has now become an important figure, all the more Chong, who will take care of everything soon. In less than a few moments, the sound of an approaching motor was heard from afar. Zhang arrogantly asked where this Ijin, which probably it was high time to teach. Jishan pointed to the guy in a blue shirt, who looked surprisingly calm. Yang in horror recoiled, not believing his eyes why this young man was here. Last time, he was almost beaten by him. And if he collides with him again, the outcome will be obvious. Perhaps Zhu Shan deliberately incites him. Meanwhile, Wu mockingly turned around. Probably this is the same Chong that threatened to deal with him. The guy looked calm and condescendingly looked at his enemies. Jishan said that this impudent behaves too boldly, and he needs to deal with him. But the next moment, Yang hit his friend with force on his cheek. He was numb. Jishan grabbed the flaming red cheek and in confusion asked why he was hit. Meanwhile, Jung bowed and said that he was deceived by this boy, and therefore he should forgive him. Then he ordered Yershan to apologize for his actions. The guy was confused and did not understand what was happening, why his friend is so afraid of this Inhen. Perhaps he is his secret boss, and in the meantime, he stated that if Yang does not dare to do anything, then perhaps the guy himself will begin a fight. However, the shameful Zhu Shan knelt down and admitted his mistake. He was leaning over the criminal, teaching him like an unreasonable child, and noticed that apparently the last time he was not enough. Then he asked how this villain was going to compensate him for moral damage. Zhu Shan could not restrain the bitter tears. Would he really have to pay compensation again? However, he was impatiently swung and stated that if he did not want to pay, then he did not intend to please. Frightened, Jishan with trembling hands held out the map and said that there is another 100,000. He felt euphoria from light prey, turning around with a smile. The hero noticed that the bandits could come again. Meanwhile, among the foliage of trees, a dark figure was watching for young men. This guy had a couple of tricks, but nothing more. He was silently walking along the street, bowing his head. But the unpleasant sensation did not leave him. Strange. Someone broke the trap, which he installed in the gorge of the cloud fog. The wife of the master in danger. The young man quickly went there, easily soaring through the air, while the wind blew into his face. Meanwhile, the person who watched him informed his brother that he had left. Soon, the young hero was above the mountain villa and looked down. Here, a dull, deadly aura is still hovering, but it is no longer used. Who could do this? Suddenly, the young man saw something amazing. His eyes opened sharply. Several red silhouettes were visible through the space. An ambush was clearly arranged here. Yiwu thoughtfully scratched his chin. It is really interesting. You need to figure it out. Soon, he went down to the ground. The enemy noticed him and shouted that this kid was here. He had to be surrounded immediately. After a moment, several strongmen, clutching knives in their hands, surrounded him from all sides. Alan noted that E was the impudence to come here again. The young man destroyed the formation left by the teacher and dares to return. It seems that he does not take the master seriously at all. The man brought the knife and asked why he destroyed the data. For a few moments, he was taken aback. However, the numbness did not last long. The young man sharply clenched his fist and stated that he was not going to answer these questions. In less than a fraction of a second, a young hero struck the enemy with a lightning-fast movement. He took a knife from him and said that everyone who does not want to die should immediately get out of here. The next moment, a knife with a dull sound fell to the ground, and the surrounding bandits froze in confusion. Taking advantage of this, he quickly soared up. Such garbage with a low level of force has no right to even look at it. Alon cried out with rage, demanding that his minions immediately catch up with this guy and not stand idle. The bandits obeyed the order, and after a minute they rushed in pursuit. He rushed through the sky and noticed another group of opponents, but they did not move. Apparently, they were waiting for him from the other side. Funny, the bandits lurking in the bushes noticed that the guy was approaching and prepared to surround him. The young man quickly headed for the thicket, and the leader of the gang gave a sign to his people to attack his signal. Yiwu smiled smugly. Finally, everything was assembled. It would be fun. He gently sank to the ground and knocked on the grass with varnished shoes. He said loudly that it was time for the bandits to leave. He was haunted by some group, and he was glad that he found those who will help to stop them. The enemy group was strained. Perhaps the young man has reinforcement. It can be dangerous, probably. He brought with him an entire army. But after a moment, the bandits decided that it doesn't matter. It was necessary to kill them all, and there it would be visible. Yiwu with a laugh observed what was happening. His plan was a success. Now the enemies will destroy each other. Below there was a rumble of battle. A huge cloud of dust rose into the sky. The leader of the gang in a daze looked at the battle and did not notice how Alon, waving a pick, darted in his direction. At the last moment, the man managed to react and block the blow. The bandits were furious. An armed group with knives attacked people in costumes. Meanwhile, Yiwu carelessly ate an apple, watching what was happening with emotion. Two enemy groups went out in earnest. The guy grinned. They can fight even to death. It's even funny. Some time passed. The leader in a suit took a breath. This fight took him too much effort. Alon noted that the enemy was strong enough, but was not going to concede. Yiwu approached the enemies and asked with a grin when they finished the fight, or perhaps they would need help. The opponents froze in a daze, not believing that he dared to return. Alon suggested that his opponent defends Yiwu, but he only grunted without even having such thoughts. The guy with a rage clenched his teeth, realizing that they were simply circled around a finger and forced to destroy each other. He laughed merrily, finding their stupidity funny. He noted that there is power, but there is no mind, since they were so easy to outwit. The leader of the gang, finally, understood the idea of the enemy and realized that they were simply scorching each other to get rid of all at once. Yiwu, with a grin, noticed that, apparently, not everything is so bad with their abilities, since it finally dawned on them. Getting angry, the man rushed forward, intending to destroy this impudent guy. Yiwu did not move, creating the impression that it was impossible to avoid a blow. However, at the last moment he easily dodged, realizing that with the mediocre skills that his enemy had, should not be so self-confident. After a moment, the guy threw the bandit to the side with a lightning-fast movement of his leg. Alon watched this in a daze, feeling the power hidden in every movement of Yiwu. The leader, with difficulty rising, realized that he had underestimated the enemy. He could not even assume that an ordinary person was able to kill so many people. And probably, this young man really possessed outstanding abilities. Yiwu, with a grin, noted that it was too boring to fight one at a time, and invited the enemies to attack at the same time. Alon squeezed his weapons tightly, preparing for an attack in a merciless battle. The warrior was sure that he would cope alone and punish this upstart, which behaves too impudently. He watched his movements with a slight mockery, noting that this blow looked more likely as a case than really dangerous. However, the next moment, Alon sharply attacked. The guy with a predatory smile was looking forward to the victory, confident that now he would definitely destroy Yiwu with one blow. However, unexpectedly, the enemy's voice was heard nearby, indifferently noting the futility of such worthless attacks. At the next moment, Alon noticed the hand extended in his direction. The enemy intended to make only a slogan, but from one blow, the brain seemed to shudder, and soon the guy fell to the ground. The leader of the gang could not believe that this was generally possible. Yiwu calmly stated that now the turn of the second, but the man was not going to wait for his fate, and pushing himself away from the ground, tried to hide as soon as possible. The leader of the gang, trying to keep his face, threw it over his shoulder, which gives him the opportunity to leave and is not going to continue the persecution. With these words, the enemy rose to the sky, his legs easily pushed off the ground. The man understood that the chances of coping with this strong opponent are extremely small, but in EU there were completely different plans. Picking up a sword in his hands, he pierced the enemy's body with one lightning, fast movement. A cold look at the guy looked at the murdered enemy, gloomily noting that it would be better to train in the next life. A moment later, the guy turned and left, leaving behind a field dotted with defeated enemies. Soon, the young hero arrived at the University of Haizhou, the place of arrival of the Kin project team. The older sister of CU was looking forward to a new participant. A lot of time has passed since someone last joined their team. Soon the door opened, and several participants entered the room. Jiang Xiaoru warmly waved her hand, welcoming her older sister. CU, with a slight smile, said that today the arrival of a new participant is expected, and gathered the whole team to introduce them to him. However, for an unknown reason, this person was delayed, and it remained only to wait a bit. After some time, the door opened again, and the guy appeared on the threshold. He immediately asked if there was a project team. Jiang Xiaoru stared at the entered in amazement. It was Ajin. The girl was in a slight bewilderment. CU was gladly confirmed that it was here that the project team was located, delighted that the new member finally arrived. The girl approached Awu, and he introduced himself, greeted the new older sister. The young lady noticed that the guy was not only talented, but also very attractive. His presence in the team, no doubt, would be a pleasant addition. Meanwhile, one of the participants drew attention to the expression on the face of the goddess, noticing her interested look aimed at the new one. This fact caused him obvious irritation. Having decided that it is necessary to teach a newcomer a lesson and immediately put him in place, the young man began to ponder the plan. Meanwhile, Ku said that Professor Van went to an important meeting and will not be able to attend today. A guy named Shei Qi mentally imagined how he destroys an impudent new one, and, taking advantage of his magical abilities, began to realize the plan. The laugh almost broke his lips. The upcoming sight promised to be truly grandiose. Yiwu felt a strange presence in his pocket, as if an extraneous object had appeared there. But before he managed to figure out the situation, the participant of the Shai Qi shouted loudly, accusing the abduction, and demanded that the thief immediately detain. The next moment, a guard and a policeman accompanying him appeared in the building. The prosecutor nervously pointed a finger at Yiwu, insisting that it was he who stole a valuable artifact. However, the young man quickly guessed that he was thrown by the subject, hoping to substitute. Tsu, maintaining severity, asked if the accusation of reality corresponds. He calmly replied that he had not taken anything. But Shei Qi continued to insist, stating that he saw everything with his own eyes and that the stolen pearl of Suiku was in the right pocket of the new one. He, remaining calm, allowed the guard to conduct a search if he doubts his words. The man came up and carefully examined the contents of his pockets. But after a moment, he raised his head and said that the suspect had nothing. The prosecutor froze in shock, like it seemed impossible, because he personally saw how the pearl was in his pocket. The young man only calmly drew the guard's attention to the fact that the true kidnapper faces him. The prosecutor, trying to hide his own crime, simply slandered another. A tense and ominous silence reigned in the room. The guy insisted on his innocence, claiming that, as a senior member of the team, he could not steal anything. He proposed to check his words. The scoundrel without hesitation agreed to search without experiencing any concern. The guard approached, demanding that he put his hands and allow him to check his pockets. Shei-Chi dutifully fulfilled this request because he was sure that law enforcement officers would not find anything suspicious. However, the situation took an unexpected turn. Although the thief was sure that he threw the pearl in his pocket, she was not there. But the next moment, an even more strange event occurred. The guard noticed something in the pocket of the prosecutor himself and, reaching out, pulled out a small bluish pearl. The young man froze in rabies, not understanding how this happened and how the artifact turned out to be with him. But it was impossible to deny the obvious. Zhu was furious that she tried to substitute another, while he himself turned out to be a thief. The guy clenched his teeth with anger. He definitely threw the pearl of Bayan. But for some reason she found himself with himself. With a thoughtful look, he appreciated the enemy, wondering how, with such an intelligence level, he dared to speak out against him. In fact, he immediately noticed someone else's pearl and felt the presence of magical energy. Not bewildered, he cleverly outwitted the enemy, quietly throwing the artifact into the pocket of Shei-Chi. Thus, the villain received the punishment that deserved and fully blurted out for meanness. Tsu, still boiling from indignation, said that even if the guy did not steal to substitute others, a serious violation for which he will be dismissed. Shei-Chi begged to give him a second chance, but the guards already grabbed him and took him. Yiwu, only with cold calm, noted that everyone was reaping what he sows. With sincere regrets, Q apologized to the guy for what happened on his first day. He reacted calmly, noting that the main thing, however, which eventually went outside. To make amends for the situation, the QU proposed to arrange a joint dinner with colleagues. Soon, the guys arrived in the university cafe. Cheerfully clinking glasses, Yi, with pleasure, drank several sips of a cold drink, penetrating the whole body with refreshing coolness. The mood improved markedly. The atmosphere had to rest. Q asked with interest why, among many dishes, he chose a barbecue. He only mysteriously replied that he had things to do with acquaintances. As soon as he agreed, Wu Tin approached the table, saying that the dishes were already ready. He turned to the girl with a proposal to inspect the house that her parents leased. Although the girl was a little taken aback, a joyful smile shone on Wu Tin's face. Meanwhile, the conversation at the table continued, and someone noticed that something was clearly happening between Yi and Wu Tin. Jiang Xiaoru watched with light chagrin, as if suspecting that these two were hiding something from the rest. He soon said that he had to leave, but invited the others to continue the meal. Taking Wu Tin by the hand, he confidently stated that they were going to her. The girl looked slightly surprised, but she did not argue and followed him. At the table, the guys delighted with their eyes with delight, noting that there was definitely something between these two. Jiang Xiaoru, on the contrary, looked slightly frustrated. The girl sighed heavily but did not say anything, despite the insulting. Wu Tin brought his friend to her home and showed the surroundings. The young man noted that the place looks very good. Especially the beautiful look impressed him. The girl noticed that the rental cost here is low, only 500 yuan per month. He handed her a card, saying that she was 1,000 yuan. He simply gave her this money so that she could pay the rest of the settlement. He also said that he plans to rent this house for a long time, so this amount is insignificant for him. Wu Tin agreed to settle the details later. In the end, she advised him to lie down early and, wishing good night, left. The young man waved her goodbye. Left alone, he felt how spiritual energy in this place was especially strong, as if piercing the space itself. He concentrated, and a ball of magic energy appeared in his palms, vibrations from which were incredibly powerful. However, suddenly external circumstances made him numb and think. The young man clearly felt a strange energy cluster nearby and directed his gaze in that direction. Without wasting time, he deftly jumped over the window and went in search of a source. An unexpected picture awaited him on the street. King Leo, with a formidable growl, moved towards a strange clot of energy. Stepping closer, he saw a huge wolf, whose frightening presence left no doubt before him, was a spiritual animal. The next moment, the beast rushed at the lion with rage. The young man only grinned. Now it became clear to him what was happening. Swinging his fist, he felt dense spiritual energy that filled the air. A moment later, the guy struck a crushing blow, and powerful cracks went from the place of collision, tearing the asphalt. His eyes flashed with scarlet fire, watching every movement of the enemy. The wolf was rapidly approaching, and Yu, frozen for only one instant, sharply rushed forward, ready to meet the enemy face to face, not taking his eyes out and not giving himself a second to think. The guy, overcoming fear, looked directly into the gaping mouth of a wild beast, where sharp fangs sparkled, ready to click at any moment. And then, having gathered all his strength in one movement, he made a lightning stroke with his foot, so powerful that the earth under them shuddered, as if from a blow of thunder. As their fierce battle, dense clubs of dust and caustic smoke gradually covered everything around, turning the battlefield into a chaotic haze, where the silhouettes were barely different. The guy, having prevailed, remained standing in a confident, victorious pose, raising his head high and looking at the defeated enemy with a cold, contemptuous expression. Soon the wolf collapsed to the ground. Broken bricks and wooden wreckage lay around it. He opened his eyes, trying to publish a powerful roar, but in vain. With the last effort, the beast nevertheless roared, but it was already too late. At this moment, Wu resolutely brought down a powerful blow to him with a fist. Magic waves scattered from the place of collision, creating destructive vibrations. Soon the body of the animal disappeared, leaving behind a small luminous ball. The young man watched this phenomenon with interest, feeling the rich spiritual energy fills his every cell. He inhaled this amazing power, and with every moment his power was growing up. In the next instant, he felt like a heavenly angel soaring above the ground and waving snow. White wings. King Leo growled joyfully, and the young man began to go down smoothly, returning his usual appearance. The guy noticed that the beast was not too pleased that the extraction was not he got. A moment later, the dog pushed off the ground and quickly rushed forward. King Leo rushed to the remnants of spiritual energy. Scattered among the wreckage, he was in perplexity, observed his actions, not understanding what exactly the beast was trying to do. But suddenly he dawned on him. His eyes flashed with tension. In front of him was a spiritual vein, exuding a bright glow. The young man did not even expect to stumble upon her. Now it was clear why there were so many spiritual animals and dense energy. It was a real treasury place of force ideal for cultivation. Now he could begin to practice the technique of 1,000 miles. Wu opened a magic book, the pages of which themselves began to turn over. He concentrated a powerful stream of power around him to activate the ability. A few minutes passed before the young man opened his eyes. At that moment, his vision became incredibly sharp. The spiritual energy was so rich that the technique worked perfectly. But something was wrong. The young man suddenly realized what could see through the walls, and accidentally discovered that Wu Tin at that moment took a bath. The girl was just about to plunge into warm water and did not even suspect that they were watching her. Wu hardly restrained emotions and mentally asked for forgiveness for this unintentional sin. The next morning, a noise was heard near the house. An ambulance drove up to the building. The young man went out into the street and looked around with surprise, not understanding what happened so early. From around the corner, he noticed Wu Tin, who in a panic tried to help his mother get up. The nurse said that the car was filled, and if the girl needs to go, she will have to call a taxi. With these words, the car door closed right in front of the bewildered Wu Ting. She stood in a daze, looking at the departing car, not believing that all this was happening in reality. Wu came closer and asked what happened. The girl replied that her mother suddenly became ill, and she was taken to the hospital. The young man, without hesitation, suggested going after as soon as possible. Meanwhile, doctors gathered in intensive care around the patient. The head doctor, with the heaviness in her voice, said that all efforts are useless to be no longer saved. Her illness was accompanied by inner cold and external heat. He never saw anything like it, and even if a divine healer appeared, he could not help her. The doctors decided to inform the family that the patient should be taken away. Wu Tin could not restrain her tears. It seemed to her impossible that this was happening in reality. She approached her mother, asking again and again how she feels. The girl begged the doctor to save her, because the mother, the only family that she had, but the doctor only shook his head, saying that the disease was too rare, and he is not able to do anything. Wu thoughtfully repeated the symptoms. Inner cold, external heat, lack of yang energy in the lungs, and excess energy of yin in dantian. It was a really rare condition, but perhaps he had a way. The head physician, with contempt, noted that the young man probably doubts their medical abilities. but he was only calmly noted the fact. The doctors mockingly asked how the guy knew such things. He answered that he had a dream, causing an even greater flurry of indignation among medical workers. The head physician said that the young man was not happy here, but he insisted that human life is in the balance, and he could try to help. One of the doctors, wanting to prove the futility of the venture, decided to give the guy a chance and explained that treatment is possible only with the consent of the family, and if it does not help, the young man will have to take responsibility. Doctors looked at each other with a grin, not believing that this self-confident guy was able to do something. He turned to the alarmed Wu Ting, asking her to trust him. The girl, looking down, agreed. Now the mother of the mother is critical, and she had no other way out, except to resort to it least. Having received approval, the young man confidently set to work, knowing what he was going on. He ordered the doctors to observe and study. Later they would even thank him for such an invaluable experience. Several thin translucent needles were extracted from a special machine. They should be introduced into acupuncture points, and then directed spiritual energy, connecting the meridians and aligning yin and yang. After a moment, the woman opened her eyes. A weak shine appeared in her gaze. The next moment, the body shuddered, and blood streams escaped from the mouth. He took her hand. Silence hung in the hall. Everyone froze in a panic. One of the doctors stated that the guy went too far and killed the patient, but the young man remained calm, assuring him that he had not killed anyone. The doctor insisted that it was pointless to deny the obvious, and pointed to the woman's motionless body. For a few moments, she really remained without movement, closing her eyes tightly. But then, after several tense moments, the woman suddenly took a deep breath. Her chest shuddered, and as if awakening from a long sleep, she slowly opened her eyes, looking around in surprise. Seeing that her mother finally woke up, Wu Tin could not hold back the tears of relief. Emotions swept her, and she, closing her mouth with her hands, almost burst into tears with joy. With a smile, he said that the treatment was completed, and very soon the woman will fully recover. This will happen literally within half an hour. The doctor, still not fully understanding what happened, asked the question of who was in front of him. The young man with a light grin replied that he was just an ordinary student. The doctor looked puzzled and, a little hesitation, admitted that they should really apologize, since they did not realize the level of skill that this guy possessed. He calmly said that an apology is not needed at all, but the next time it is worth being more attentive and not show such a frank distrust. The woman, having recovered from the shock, asked who this young man was because she saw him for the first time. Wu Tin explained that in front of her, her classmate named Bison, who managed to save her mother, having performed a real miracle. Madame gratefully noted that she was infinitely grateful for his help. The girl, still impressed by what happened, admitted that the guy had rendered her a huge service, and now she does not even know how to thank him. The young man only smiled mysteriously and noticed that they would discuss the answer to this question at home. Wu Tin looked at him in surprise, clearly not understanding what he was talking about. The guy, noticing her confusion, only laughed merrily, adding that he knew the best way to get gratitude. Some time passed. The young man was already sitting at the kitchen table, greedily absorbing the meat, as he was very hungry after healing. Wu Tin watched with a smile how he pushes food, and meanwhile a mountain of empty plates grew rapidly around him. Finally, sitting down, the guy leaned back in his chair and with a pleased look said that he was now feeling an incredible surge of strength and energy. The girl shook her head with easy bewilderment, realizing that the same payment that he mentioned was only in preparing lunch for him. The young man, noticing her reaction, rose cheerfully from the table and with sincere gratitude stated that this dinner was just magnificent. Ignoring the slightly frustrated appearance of Wu Tin, he headed for himself, saying that he was going to relax a bit. The girl waved her hand with a slight chagrin, wishing her good night. However, when he left, her eyes suddenly sparkled, and a slight smile appeared on her lips. Mr. Amazing person, and how great it would be if she once had a chance to marry him. Meanwhile, Wu focused on the concentration of magical energy within his body, and noted that the process of cultivation in this place is really more effective. Realizing this, the young man decided to speed up his training and reach a new level as soon as possible. But suddenly his concentration was violated by the furious, powerful barking of the dog, which sounded nearby. Wu was surprised to turn to King Leo, asking what he was doing here and why he came to this place. However, after a moment, the young man understood the true reason for the appearance of the dog. Someone is plotting unkind against Aunt Joe. The guy was furious, who dared to organize a conspiracy against his teacher's wife. This person would pay dearly for his actions. Without losing a second, he quickly rushed forward, cutting the air, and rushed to the estate. At the same time, in the area where the villa was located, there were cardinal changes. Mr. and warned Jiang's family in advance of a possible explosion, thanks to which everyone managed to leave the territory. And it was possible to avoid the victims. However, the Yinfeng formation established in this place was accidentally destroyed by a fire. Years of hard work went to dust. And now, to extend the life of the old master Jiang, it will be necessary to use extraordinary methods. A woman, realizing the seriousness of the situation, was ready to pay any price. But the man, looking at her with a bloodthirsty smile, said that he needed a drop of her heart blood, a special essence that can be extracted with a special technique without resorting to surgical intervention. She did not hesitate for a second and firmly replied that she agreed if she saved her father, she was ready to make such a victim. The man nodded and said that in this case, they needed to immediately go inside to carry out the ritual of removing heart blood. The master's minions looked at each other, grinning. This woman turned out to be a ridiculous naive. The teacher was enough only a couple of cleverly selected words to fool her. And now, the lady really believes that she can survive after her heart proof was taken from her. One of the guys stated that he had already mastered Yinfeng's formation and could stop it in the blink of an eye. With these words, he released forward a small sheet written by mystical signs. The sheet rushed to the door, surrounded by ominous energy. Suddenly, there was a powerful explosion which shook everything around. However, a strange mess arose in the sky. Majestically soaring on the sword of the Wu suddenly appeared above the battlefield. The young master looked up in amazement, not understanding what was happening and who was trying to harm him. Yiwu breathed out with relief, realizing that he had finally arrived where he needed. A huge, mighty dog flew next to him, an incredible sight, plunging those present in shock. The students below stared at the sky with distrust, not believing their eyes. The dog flying on the sword, it went beyond their understanding. Yiwu noticed that someone restored Yinfeng's formation. It is not surprising that King Liu is so excited. The students realized that they were faced with Yokai, and this portended a fierce battle. They decided that they could not allow him to destroy the Yinfeng formation, so they released a powerful weapon forward. Attacks rushed towards Yiwu, who calmly stood next to his faithful dog. However, the young man easily reflected them and used his powerful sword. Realizing that the forces were unequal, the students hastened to leave the way, realizing that they could suffer. The ancient masters tried to stay on their feet, but a powerful gust of wind knocked them down. The energy was so strong that it did not make it possible to accept the vertical position of the body. Going down, Yu, with a cold expression on his face, said that now he realized who was standing behind the restoration of Yinfeng's formation. Are they really not afraid to interrupt their own life cycle? The guys took a breath heavily. They were deceived. This young man was not a monster. Although they would have preferred a ghost in front of them, fear seized them so strongly, they decided that this alien prevents them from completing the installation of the formation. But in fact, he is just a miserable garbage that did not stand their attention. He thought, their cultivation seemed superficial. These guys did not look capable of creating such a complex formation. Maybe there is someone else here. Meanwhile, one of the guys grabbed the sword, charged it with a powerful force and prepared for the attack. He turned to his partner and offered to activate the Tunyin array to confront the enemy. With these words, the sorcerer called on a demonic spell, a murderous heavenly heart that deprives the mind and suppresses the spirit. A moment later, he announced that the array was activated. Now they have become even more powerful. A majestic icon appeared on Earth, emitting powerful categories of electric energy. The sorcerer was seized with an evil force, and suddenly a demonic embodiment appeared next to him. It was not an ordinary cultivator. The guy clearly used the skills of ancient times. Yiwu smiled thoughtfully. There were still people associated with the family of demons. However, his opponent raged in a rage like nonsense and rushed forward with incredible speed. He looked angry, his body exuded powerful evil energy, enhancing his combat abilities. But Yiwu did not look frightened. He just took a deep breath. The young man released icy breath, fixing him right on the enemy. The enemy student screamed in horror. His body was shot by the cold, depriving the opportunity to move. Yi, with a mockery, said that with such abilities it is not at all necessary to resort to evil forces. However, if someone chooses this path and loses his mind, he deserves punishment. With these words, the young man grabbed the enemy by the neck and began to strangle. He calmly stated that only then he could do the right thing, and squeezed his grip even stronger. After a moment, He lifted and threw back the exhausted enemy like unnecessary garbage. The student collapsed. His older brother froze in a daze, not knowing what to do. Realizing that in front of them was an opponent of unprecedented strength, the guy warned his comrades this person is able to destroy them. The younger student ordered his minister to flee, and he collapsed without strength to the ground. The remaining student backed away, realizing that he should really follow this advice. He decided to go to the teacher to take revenge on the deceased friend. However, unexpectedly, the Wu, who was a moment ago, suddenly appeared right in front of him. The young man calmly stated that he wanted to meet their mentor. The senior student tried to take advantage of the shadow steps, but all his attempts to hide were unsuccessful. He grabbed his neck and asked who their teacher was, obviously. It was he who ordered to establish the Yinfeng formation. The frightened guy began to beg for mercy and promised to tell everything if he was released. He admitted that their teacher is on the estate and that it was he who instructed to establish the formation. Previously, this person was a great master from Mount Lonchu, but he was expelled for violation of the rules, overwhelmed by a demonic heart and exhausted nerves. He could no longer stay there and founded his own sect, collecting followers. Many years ago, he learned that the estate was held by clouds and fog, and an ancient treasure was hiding above it. But his appearance required at least 1,000 years. To speed up the process, the teacher destroyed the protective barrier and convinced the old master Jiang to buy this estate. Then the wizard secretly created the Yinfeng formation to absorb the energy of Jian living there and bring the appearance of treasures. After listening to the story, he was thoughtfully scratched his chin. Now everything became clear. The frightened student collapsed to his knees, begging the great immortal to spare him for the truth told. However, he only grunted and once again clarified what he was achieving. The next second, powerful energy broke out in the hands of the young men. He calmly said that the cultivator using such methods does not deserve mercy. A powerful explosion sounded, after which the student fell unconscious. Since the master's wife was in danger, he understood that he had to find her as soon as possible. He was about to hit the road when a thought dawned on him, and the guy stopped. If it appears in its true appearance, then it will give out its cultivation. You need to hide your strength. Meanwhile, the young lady sat in a huge hall, in an armchair, and calmly said that she was ready. You could start taking heart blood. The sorcerer approached her with a huge knife, coldly saying that her blood would take her right now. The woman felt anxiety. She reminded him of the promise not to cut her. Did the bastard still decide to deceive? The sorcerer sharply raised his weapon, and with a mockery asked if the lady really understood this only now, but too late. The woman mentally called to the rescue, and the knife in the hand of the villain inexorably approached. She was horrified, not knowing how to avoid this terrible fate. When it seemed that there was no salvation, he suddenly appeared. He stopped the bastard's hand in one movement. The sorcerer looked in front of him and saw a young man whose powerful fist was directed right at him. The next moment, the guy hit the enemy with force, and he flew into the wall with a roar. Yiwu coldly said that it was painful for innocent women in broad daylight, the top of shamelessness. To remain unnoticed, he used a disguise that resembled an image from a famous TV show, intending to hide his true personality even from the mistress herself. The sorcerer, meanwhile, rose and said that such a jerk with weak cultivation could not block his path. With these words, the man released the yellow seal that rushed forward. On the way, the seal transformed into a huge and evil spirit, which revealed its powerful mouth and rushed into the attack. The mistress was very scared, but he said with anger that the cultivator who betrayed his way and went against the will of heaven could not remain unpunished. With these words, the young man accelerated and struck his enemy with a sharp movement. With one movement of his hand, he destroyed the enemy, from which only puffs of smoke remained. The sorcerer became furious. As possible, the evil spirit, which he raised 10 years, was instantly destroyed by this guy. He was preparing a fist and mockingly asked what the old man was waiting for. Does he really not intend to join the battle? However, the magician was not one of those who were easy to intimidate. He folded his hands, creating a protective circle around him, which turned into a powerful shield. Yiwu accelerated and struck, but he only crashed into the barrier. The guy was not at a loss. These are just cheap tricks. The magician, meanwhile, caused an evil spirit and ordered him to attack. He exclaimed that it was the strongest trump card. It is interesting to see how the enemy to cope. The next moment, several spiritual entities, revealing the mouth, rapidly rushed to eat Wu. But the young man concentrated powerful energy around him. 1,000 gods and saints defended his true spirit. In the next instant, he released the blue chains forward, which instantly wrapped around evil spirits. They clogged in horror, but could not escape from the captivity and wriggled helplessly. The sorcerer could not believe what power, now he seriously thought about, with whom he was dealing. Yiwu sharply threw another chain and stated that he was a real father. The sorcerer clenched his teeth with rage. How so? Because he believed that this was just an inexperienced student. However, now the enemy understood that it would be safer to escape and not risk life. He was furious, so that the enemy did not even think that he could hide. The sorcerer rushed through the forest, hoping to save his worthless life. But suddenly the magician felt behind the approach of something huge and evil. The next second, the giant beast caught up with him and grabbed him. The sorcerer shouted in horror, but could not escape. A moment passed and he, exhausted, collapsed to the ground, and the beast looked contemptuously at him. Yiwu caught up with them and ordered King Leo to avenge the offensive words that the villain said. The dog growled and prepared for the attack. The sorcerer watched in fear, but could no longer resist. Another moment passed, and it was all over. He was patting the right beast, and he in response joyfully barked. Turning back, the young man saw that the teacher's wife chased a villain with reinforcement. Therefore, the guy decided to dissolve in space, leaving an evil sorcerer to lie on the edge. Soon, strong warriors appeared, ready to grab this old Taos. The lady saw a defeated man who lay on the ground and did not show signs of life. Turning to his servants, the woman said that the master was killed by some mysterious person, and if he was suddenly lucky to meet him, then they should properly thank him. He watched this out of the shelter. The guy spent all the spiritual energy, so he suggested that King Leo return and replenish its reserves. Soon he sank to the ground and took a breath. Finally, the hero was at home. The young man decided to cultivate here, and the King Leo had to guard him when he was completing the process. He would give the faithful satellite the spiritual award. But suddenly a strong hand lay on the guy's shoulder. The stranger said that he should not be here. Yiwu turned around and saw several arrogant men next to him, who looked at him suspiciously. The guy asked who they were and why they came here to establish their own orders. The unknown replied that they, the bodyguards of Mr. Ho, and arrived here for the sake of his safety. Right now, the master trains his fist technique, and no one has the right to distract him. He asked with surprise, "Is it really called the training of fist technology, because it was more like a regular warm-up?" The man grabbed the guy by the clothes and threatened that it was impossible to mock and insult the elder. But Huo himself unexpectedly interrupted their skirmish, ordering his subordinates to calm down and not touch the guy. The bodyguard froze, looking in surprise at his master. The guy wanted to explain that this type said obscene things about him. Huo turned to Yiwu and asked what he had in mind. The young man replied that even in this technique there is his grace. She lacks several movements. It is like a dish without salt. It looks appetizing, but not very good. The master was very surprised and said that this technique passed to him from the ancestor, and it is impossible to slander it before judging. The young man should provide evidence. Yiwu confidently replied that he would help to bring this technique to the ideal. If the old man is satisfied, then he will leave this place and allow him to continue training. Having thought a little, Huo came to the conclusion that this guy is quite impudent. If he really fulfills the promised, then the master would not only give this place but also begin to call him his teacher. Yiwu clenched his fists and said that in this case the training begins right now. The guy spread his hands and warned that he would show only once. The next moment he sharply rushed forward and hit the air with his fist with force. An incredible tree, standing nearby, instantly collapsed. The bodyguards, as well as Mr. Huo himself, were stunned and looked at each other. The old man exclaimed that this was simply impossible. With the same technique, his blows several times weaker. The guard noticed that this guy was really very strong. They realized that they were lucky, that they had not started a fight, otherwise now they would be in the place of that tree. Yiwu decided that the demonstrated force was quite enough. Huo called him his teacher. The old man thanked for the instruction and admitted that he had acted recklessly. He apologized for his words. He said that now they could leave this place. Huo smiled and said that, of course, he was a man of a word, and now this place belongs to Yiwu. Having bowed respectfully, the old man added that he was ready to fulfill any conditions. The young man noted that he needed peace and solitude, so he wanted no more people in this place. Huo turned to his bodyguards and ordered them to leave this place as soon as possible. He said to his faithful dog that now nothing should interfere with them, and he can do the practice of cultivation. Meanwhile, Huo ordered his subordinates to find out everything about the past of this mysterious teacher. He has concentrated forces, too many events have occurred recently, and it seemed to him that all this was connected with the past, despite the difference of 2,000 years. Aunt Joe and his wife's wife were amazingly similar. Their development levels are almost identical, and the master himself also turned out to be a cultivator. All this indicated that the world of improvement still exists. The guy could not believe that this was just a coincidence. Some secrets were clearly hiding behind this. The young man decided that he needed to learn more about this world. He thoughtfully looked at the phone and dialed a familiar number. Yiwu called his older sister Siyu and asked if there is a place at their university where you can find information about the events of 2,000 years ago. The girl replied that there are few such information at the university, but recently the research group went to the archaeological excavations of the tomb. Rumors that its owner have about 2,000 years. If he is interested, then he can come in the evening and take everything away with his own eyes. He promised that he would definitely look. The guy decided not to miss this opportunity. Having removed the phone, the young man noted that the tomb of this age is extremely curious, and he should get to the bottom of the truth. Perhaps the clue lies there. Soon night came, and the group hit the road. Soft clouds barely pulled the moon. Su explained that several bodyguards arrived with them, whom the university sent for the sake of security. The tomb seemed strange, and the archaeological team that came in front of them still has not returned. Based on precautions, they decided to take the guards with them. Jiang Xiaoru and Lin Jianxian trembled with fear. They were not left a bad foreboding. Su strictly ordered her not to carry nonsense. Everyone will go down together, and nothing bad will happen. Some time passed. The team delved into the cave. Jiang Xiaoru continued to shake, weaving behind. The bodyguards looked around with curiosity. The cave was huge. Jiang Xiaoru noticed that even her house was less than this place. Su recalled that their main task, to find a missing archaeological team and bring a valuable artifact to study to the university. The guys walked further when Yiwu suddenly felt strange energy. The guy turned around but did not see anything. It puzzled him very much. Su noticed his anxiety and asked what was the matter. But the young man did not want to scare the guys ahead of time, so he lied that he simply had a dizzy. The travelers did not know that they were already following them. Several people in masks watched the new archaeological group. They have already destroyed the past team. One of them said that that night no one would come out of here alive. Everyone will die. A sharp weapon shone in his hand, ready to strike at any second. Many deadly needles instantly flew out of this device. He tensed and immediately felt the approaching danger. The young man sharply warned the others to be careful and stood in front of them, blocking the path of attack. The hero easily caught all the needles with one hand. It turned out to be easy. The next moment he had already held them in the palm of his hand, thereby preventing a blow. The enemy froze in confusion. He did not understand why the attack did not reach the goal. It was too strange and incomprehensible. The bodyguards cooked weapons and looked around warily. Suddenly, dark silhouettes began to appear from the fog. Probably, it were enemies. The girls noticeably tensed. One of them whispered frantically about ghosts, but the other hastened to calm her down, urging her not to give in to fear. The guards immediately charged the weapon, warning that if necessary they would open fire. Masked people gradually left the dense veil of dust, saying that they were not afraid of attack. Shots were heard, the bodyguards attacked, not giving the enemy a chance to maneuver. However, one of the enemies suddenly waved his hand, and magical outbreaks flashed in the air, rushing right at them. Explosions stunned space. Thick smoke overshadowed the battlefield. Shells met on the fly. There were cries of pain. Magic shells overtook bodyguards. Men in panic covered their face with their hands, but the effect of deadly weapons was too powerful. The girls trembled with horror, realizing that they were left without protection. The enemies thoughtfully and appreciatingly considered the arrived beautiful women. One of them with a mockery offered to have fun before getting rid of them completely. His partner supported the idea, with a grin adding that they could share the prey. Suddenly there was a calm voice of the Wu, about which it seemed everyone forgot, reminded of his presence. The enemies turned around. His figure was barely distinguishable in smoke, and yet the presence of this guy here was clearly superfluous. One of the men grinned, noting that the enemy seemed weak. He was sure that he could destroy him with one blow. In the next instant, he threw a huge magic shell right at the young man. Yiwu indifferently watched an approaching attack and did not move. At the last moment, the guy blocked her with a light movement of his hand. Magical energy dissipated in the air without causing him harm. The explosion shocked the space, and caustic smoke instantly filled the space. The enemy laughed nervously, realizing that he was attacked only for fun. The girls behind him coughed, feeling the caustic smell of smoke. Their fear became stronger. Young ladies exhaustedly fell on the floor unconscious. The action of the bomb was instant. Iwu dismissively noted that such tricks look very sorry. The bandit was furious. It is strange why this type remained unharmed, even with such a powerful attack. The guy did not look frightened, on the contrary. His every movement radiated incredible calm. Grabbing a sharp, sparkling knife, the enemy rushed forward confident to win. He intended to cut his throat with a daring young man and thereby finish this discussion. However, he, remaining motionless, stopped the attack, easily caught the blade with 2 fingers. After a moment, the weapon with a bang split in 2. The sharp fragment ripped off the attacker's shoulder, forcing him to cry out in pain. The bandit weakened and soon fell, losing consciousness. His minions, who witnessed this scene, were horrified. They clearly underestimated their enemy. Iwu coldly asked if enemies were going to attack everything at once or one at a time. The enemies were at a loss. One of the younger ones asked the elder with anxiously what to do. He, gritting his teeth, said that not everything was lost yet. He pulled out an ancient artifact, a lamp, sealing souls. This thing was clearly alerted by this thing. It could have been useful to him. The enemy noticed the guy's reaction and smiled smugly, hinting that the young man had no other choice but to kneel and pray for mercy. Despite the words of the enemy, he remained motionless, only silently watching him. The second bandit decided that the young man is very scared, and therefore will not be difficult to cope with him. The leader of the criminals made the last warning. If the young man leaning before him right now, then he may save his life. But at that moment his self-confidence trembled. He took a step forward, but the next moment the incredible occurred. The young man made a sharp jerk with his foot and inflicted a crushing blow. The enemy shuddered in pain and rage. He clearly did not expect this and looked confused. The villain, turning to his partner, viciously stated that he dared to hit him, which means he deserves death. The bastard activated the action of his lamp, but at the same moment the powerful chains closed around it, preventing the use of power. Iwu with interest noted that an artifact sealing the souls, a very standing find and now belongs to him. The guy concentrated, and the chains finally subjugated the magic object, which could now serve him. The young man looked around and began to inspect the place of the fight, and the chains slipped quietly nearby. In the next instant, he abruptly attacked the enemy, directing the chains forward. The bastard felt that this was the end. He tried to resist, but it was too late. At the same moment, the magic shackles were constrained, and the spirit separated from the physical shell. The bandit in despair begged his partner for help, but he, covered by fear, hesitated and finally threw the lamp. She fell to the ground, continuing to radiate a powerful, sparkling radiance. The leader of the gang, trembling, asked for forgiveness from his minister, muttering that he did not want this. He sank in front of the lamp, trying to save his position. But it was too late. He picked up an artifact and calmly noticed that instead of repentance, he could follow his comrade. The unfortunate bastard sank to the ground, seized with horror. In the next instant, his soul was also sealed in a magic chain. Now he was holding a lamp in his hands, and his enemies were captured inside it. But that was not all. Suspicious sounds came from the darkness. The young man turned sharply, carefully examining the surroundings, trying to understand what it could be. He approached the Tsu, carefully took her in his arms, and quietly said that now everything was in order. Then he gave the young lady a restoring pill. As soon as the girl swallowed her, the condition began to improve markedly. Soon, the older sister opened her eyes and looked around with anxiously. For a moment, the girl froze in a daze, trying to comprehend what was happening. Zhang Xiaoru and her friend also began to recover. They felt a severe headache. Suddenly, Lin Jianxian noticed something amazing, and her eyes opened widely from shock. Right in front of the girls lay the bodies of defeated enemies, motionless and frightening. The young lady in horror hid behind her wu and whispered in a trembling voice that it was the dead. Tsu and Zhang Xiaoru trembled, shocked by the sight saw. Iwu realized that he had forgotten to deal with the bodies of enemies, and now he had to explain the situation. After a short pause, the guy calmly explained that after the death of their bodyguards, he lifted the weapon and entered the battle, and then was able to win. The girls gratefully noted that he was truly strong and a real hero. He was embarrassed and noticed that they were too extolled. A moment later, the guy said that nearby he saw a strange wall that needs to be examined. The young man approached her and carefully touched his palm. He did not know what was hiding behind this barrier, but the surface was surprisingly hot. At the same moment, something strange happened. The bricks went to the sides with a loud rumble. Yiwu frowned, not understanding that all this means that what was happening seemed extremely mysterious to him. Su explained that they opened the door to the main tomb, and now she herself invites them inside. The girl enthusiastically stated that this is a great opportunity to look inside and find out what was hiding there. He was walking behind the rest, thinking about how saturated the spiritual energy was here. If cultivators were found here, this could become an interesting test for him. For several minutes, they carefully moved along the dark and empty hall, looking around. Suddenly, Siyu was wary, catching strange sounds and turned sharply. Right in front of her, a creepy skeleton's head appeared. The sight was truly frightening. After a moment, everyone saw that dozens of skeletons, extinct in a circle, were sitting in front of them. Su, with trembling in her voice, asked who these people are and why they were all dead. The situation looked ominous. She cautiously came closer and noticed that a sword was lying on the head of one of the skeletons. The young girl held out her hand, wanting to take a weapon for study. But suddenly this Wu sharply called to her, demanding that a friend does not touch the sword, as this could be extremely dangerous. Siyu turned in surprise, not understanding why he reacted like that, but obeyed. However, at the same moment, a powerful energy wave threw it back. Yiwu barely managed to catch her, warning that she should be careful. Su fell to the floor, but thanks to the support of Yi, her fall was not so tough. The girl was breathing heavily, trying to recover. Meanwhile, powerful electric discharges appeared in the sky, instantly attracting the attention of local magicians. Several strong guys in white clothes froze, watching this phenomenon with obvious surprise. Young Madame Zhang Jian whispered that in front of them is a magical phenomenon of lightning. Spiritual energy in the tomb grew rapidly, which testified to the appearance of a valuable treasure. The girl's minister announced anxiously that the connection with their people sent inward was lost. Zhang Jian frowned, hearing this news, and said not to panic with obvious irritation. The girl ordered her team to go to the tomb, and to the rest to guard the entrance and prevent anyone from leaving it. At this time, in the cave, Yi Wu worriedly asked Su how she feels. The girl assured that she was all right. Zhang Xiaoer and Lin Jianxian looked even more frightened, because their fears were confirmed. The ghosts really existed, and this was really scary. Suddenly, the skeletons lit up with bright light and began to rise. Their terrible appearance inspired real horror. Yiwu warned the girls to stay behind and would not lean out. One of the skeletons arrogantly said that there were no place in these possessions to the strangers, and ordered them to be cleaned up until it was too late. The young man prepared for battle and asked who is the master of these skeletons, wanting to find out the name of their leader. But the skeletons refused to answer, saying that their only task was to destroy strangers. The armed crowd rushed forward, shouting threats about the imminent death of the violators. Yiwu only grinned. If he does not want to speak, it means that the conversation can be replaced with a fight. He released a powerful magic ball that rushed forward, destroying the silence. Under its influence, skeletons began to collapse, losing their weapons. The girls watched what was happening in amazement, not believing their eyes. Whether their companion really has such a powerful magic. One of the defeated skeletons, barely holding, poorly asked who he was. Yi Wu, clutching the rest of the sword in his hand, looked coldly at the enemy. However, instead of an answer, the young man only noticed that his name does not matter. He was interested in completely different. The guy waved his weapon, noting that the undead crossed the line and angered him. One blow was enough for several skeletons to crumble into dust. Then the young man threw the blade to the ground, noting that even after 1,000 years of suffering, their end came. Now they will be able to reborn, avoiding torment. Su looked at him in amazement. The girl thought about who this is actually this Wu, because it is obvious that he is not an ordinary person. The young man only smiled softly, saying that he was just a good person and he should not be afraid. Suddenly, a sword began to fall from the ceiling, emitting powerful magic streams of lightning. Yiwu, alarmed at this phenomenon, in front of him was a thunderous sword containing the crushing power of lightning. For several moments, Yiwu did not take his eyes off the sword, feeling the power emanating from him. Suddenly, the young man was alert, staring at the darkness intently. The girls also noticed an approaching danger and froze in fear. Zhang Jiayon, along with the fighters, was rapidly approaching. Her gaze was full of determination. He instinctively covered his companion with his hand, protecting them from a possible threat. Zhang Jian grinned as she thought, the treasure was here and they arrived on time. Su frowned. Everything that was happening seemed to her a scene from a combat film. Zhang Jian, with a smug smile, approached the researchers, and then she stated that if this guy dared to look at the thunderous sword, she was obliged to give him away. Iwu with contempt noted that in front of him is a new wave of Zhubaptsov, with whom it would be easy to cope. One of the faithful minions, Zhang Jian, a young fighter, said that this young man may have a force, but this is not a problem. They will quickly show who is the main one here. Several strong guys at once rushed into a brutal attack. One of Gromil said that this was their territory, and no one would dare to challenge their right to it. He calmly watched the approaching enemies. At the last moment, he made a sharp maneuver, evading the attack. The striker waved his sword, but could not even hook the enemy. In response, Wu struck a swift blow, from which the enemy backed away and then collapsed to the side. The next accurate blow with his foot finally sent him to the knockout. Zhang Jian watched the battle with horror. She could not understand who this young man was and why he was so strong. Realizing that gross power would not bring her victory, the girl decided to act differently. Yi Wu wisely turned into an attempt to unravel the ominous plan of the opponent. With a cunning smile, she approached the frightened ladies and stated that it was better for the young man to stop the battle. Zhang Jangle grabbed the girls captured and said with a self-humous look that she could now manage the situation. The lady emphasized that she did not hold evil to the guy for the death of her people, but does not intend to say goodbye to her dream. This thunderous sword belongs to her, and Yi Wu must unconditionally give it. Otherwise, the companions will die in an instant, very quickly. Jiang Xiaoru looked at the young man with a prayer, begging him to save them from this fate. He sighed heavily and reluctantly agreed. He invited the enemies to pick up a thunderous sword. Jiang Zhong ordered her people to follow the captives, and she went to the sword. The girl quickly rushed up to the magical artifact. When her fingers touched the blade, she felt a powerful stream of energy. But the next moment, magic chains flashed around her, rushing to her body. The partners Zhang Jian turned sharply, feeling the approaching threat. The young lady also felt the approach of danger and looked around in a daze. The next moment, strong fighters were destroyed, and their souls swallowed magic chains. He was worried about the girls, how they feel. They replied that everything was in order with them. Zhang Jiayun became furious. Her plan failed, and this young man is to blame for everything. With rage, she stated that she spared him in vain, as he dared to attack her people. Yi Wu calmly replied that they were his enemies, and the guy must fight to win. Zhang Jian arrogantly recognized him as a worthy opponent, but emphasized that now she has a thunderous sword in her hands, which means that its end was close. The next second, the girl created a magic attack in the form of several blue fire-breathing dragons. They rushed to Yi Wu, emitting destructive magical vibrations. Zhang Jian gloatingly remarked that her enemy was powerless before such power. However, the young man was not at a loss and began to act with lightning speed. A powerful shield rose from the ground, protecting the hero from the attack. The opponent, in amazement, watched what was happening. Not believing her eyes, the guy retreated to a safe distance, making it inaccessible to the attack. At that moment, a powerful explosion came next to Zhang Jian, which made her cry out with horror. Yi Wu noticed that a thunderous sword is a spiritual artifact. He proposed teaching it to use it correctly. The girl hissed with hatred that the young man underestimates her strength and signed a death sentence himself. The young man easily rose into the air, remaining absolutely calm. Zhang Jian opened her eyes in shock. It seemed to her that in front of her, just an illusion. But after a moment, the girl realized that she was in a magic cage. He asked with a mockery how such a situation was. At that moment, he rapidly pulled out her arms from her hands. Zhang Jian looked shocked. Yi Wu advised her to carefully monitor her sword and not to allow oversights. Next, the young man rose higher, and the girl cried out in amazement. The young man demonstrated how to actually use a thunderous sword, hanging in the air. Zhang Jian instinctively covered her face with her hands, feeling the electric discharges thicken around her. She screamed desperately, realizing that her defeat was inevitable. But the next second, it all ended. He smoothly sank to the ground and looked around. He carefully studied the weapon in his hands. His appearance confirmed the magical origin. The mysterious icon flashed on a bright, sparkling blade. Meanwhile, Zhang Jian, shrouded in electric discharges, screamed with horror. The young lady threw up under the ceiling under the influence of electric discharges. Soon, the girl fell to the ground. Q and the rest stated that she was dead. However, he calmly assured the young ladies that Zhang Jian was still alive and urged them not to worry. Su looked sternly at the satellites, thinking about how the young man is able to use such magic. His personality became more and more mysterious. Meanwhile, a thunderous sword pierced the ground. He was explained that this was not magic, but cultivation. Today, he accidentally found an ancient text about 9 thunderclouds, so this adventure was not so useless. At the same time, on the edge of the cliff, the magician anxiously watched the heavenly phenomenon that appeared above the ancient tomb. His appearance did not foresee anything unusual, but doubts crept into the old man's soul. The man knew that Zhang Jian had gone there, but she still did not answer his challenges. The annoyed master foresaw the misfortune that was supposed to affect everyone. Meanwhile, he opened his eyes because he heard the sound next to him. The guy was sitting in a meditative pose, and Zhang Jian began to gradually come to his senses. Yiwu abruptly broke and rushed forward, saying with a satisfied smile that he had achieved his plan. In horror, the girl prayed for mercy, while the young man had already grabbed her by the throat. Zhang Jiayun, panting, admitted that she belongs to the sect of Guan Shanya and arrived here on the orders of the mentor in search of treasures. She needed a thunderous sword. Yiwu released her, thinking, as he expected, the sects of cultivators still exist. The guy concentrated powerful energy in his hands, intending to leave his sword for himself, and the girl ordered to get out. Zhang Jian sharply grabbed his hand, asking to stop. She was ready to follow him and follow any of his orders. Having failed the task, she knew that if she returned empty-handed, she would be killed. But under the protection of such a powerful person as Yule, she could survive. However, the young man made it clear that he was not interested in this proposal. Turning around, the guy left, leaving her no choice and a chance to justify himself. Lin Jianxian sighed in relief. Finally, they could leave this gloomy place. In the meantime, he concentrated energy in his hands and imposed a spell on the girls. Zhang Jian was wary. He is their friend. Why he does it? The young man understood her confusion, but washed part of the memories consciously. His cultivation was disclosed, and if they learn about it, the consequences could be unpleasant. The night flew by quickly, and finally a new day came. The bright rays of the sun lit up the sky. The 3 girls gradually came to their senses. They woke up in the office of the project team. In the meantime, he studied the manuscripts found in the tomb. They were ancient, but not very valuable. Su, having awakened the first, looked around with surprise. Her consciousness gradually cleared up, but the understanding of the situation was not easy. The young man turned around and greeted her, explaining that this was the office of the project group. The girl, scratching her head, began to remember that they were in the tomb, but could not understand how they were here. He explained that this was a normal reaction. There was too much oxygen in the tomb, which is why everyone lost consciousness. Suddenly, his stomach rumbled treacherously, demanding urgent attention. The guy felt a sharp malaise and decided to urgently find the restroom. He headed for the exit, telling his friend to rest. Going into the corridor, he saw the workers engaged in the repair. The signs on the doors were removed, but one of the employees suggested that the men's cabin on the left. The young man hastily went inside, confident that he got to the right place. However, to his amazement, a girl was in the booth. She looked extremely embarrassed. Her face was distorted by horror, and she screamed, accusing him of perversion, after which she pushed him up with force. The guy fell with a roar, hitting his back against the wall. The girl, jumping out of the booth, was not going to leave it just like that. The desire to teach a stranger was red in her eyes. With her fists, she attacked the unfortunate EU, barely giving him time to react. Nevertheless, the young lady managed to teach the guy, throwing poisoned needles into him. The girl paralyzed him with her magic, depriving the ability to move within a day. She announced with a smile that today he had to spend the day in the toilet so as not to make nonsense in the future. The girl noticed that everyone was reaping the fruits of his actions, so her actions are quite fair. He could not restrain the bitter tears. Disappointment covered him with his head. He did not understand why he was in such a situation, because the young man himself was a victim of a coincidence. At this time, several girls approached the restroom. They discussed a new professor of a medical school named Zhang Xiahua. The young woman at the age of 20 has already become the general director, which spoke of her outstanding abilities. One of the girls approached the booth and tried to open the door, but something was alerted. He kept the door with all his might, and outside they were perplexed what was happening. The young man was covered by rage. The woman he accidentally saw in the booth was ruthless and blocked all his meridians. Fortunately, the guy could use internal energy to restore strength. Otherwise, he would really have to sit here all day. Having concentrated, the young man involved spiritual abilities. The next moment, sharp needles left his body. Having gained freedom, the guy experienced relief, but he could not leave it just like that. Was going to find that girl and pay her. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiahua arrived in the registration office. The secretary at the Persistent smiled affably, noting that she had heard a lot about the new employee. She handed the girl prepared materials for familiarization. Zhang Xiahua took the papers, smiled gratefully, and was about to study them. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Several men in white shirts entered the room. The leading guy with a grin stated that Zhang Xiahua had finally found. The secretary indignantly recalled that this is an office of the educational institution, and the entrance is prohibited to outsiders. However, the stranger, feeling like the master of position, ignored her words, taking out the dagger from his pocket. He threw a weapon into a woman. The lady froze in pain, unable to move. Her face was distorted. Zhang Xiahua watched what was happening in horror. The girl turned pale and her eyes opened widely with fear. The villain indifferently passed by the wounded woman and approached Zhang Xiahua, trembling with horror. This man, Liu Guishen, the villain, reminded his girlfriend that at the last auction she acquired a rare plant with a divine aroma that he wanted to get. The girl said that she had already returned him to him, but Liu Guishen did not take her words seriously. He ordered his people to knit a lady in order to refresh her memory. Zhang Xiahua tried to break out and loudly demanded to let go, but the abductors only advised not to waste energy in vain and put up with. A moment later, the door of the black car slammed shut. The leader gave the order to go further. He, who became a random witness, froze. It seemed to him that she was abducted by her, or it was the game of his imagination. The guy looked thoughtfully after the leaving car. He needed to find out the truth. An hour later, alarming events unfolded in the gloomy building. Zhang Xiahua sat, tied hand and foot. Her tormentor announced that she had the last chance. Liu Guishen threw the phone to the girl and ordered her to call to demand the plants back. Otherwise, she should not blame him for cruelty. The young lady raised her head, looked contemptuously at him, and spat in his face with a challenge. Her gaze was full of courage and contempt. Liu Guishen exploded from anger. In a rage, he demanded an explanation of what right she had to behave so boldly. Zhang Xiahua, with flaming indignation, replied that the plant belongs to her, because she herself bought it, and no one has the right to take it away from her. The next moment, the bastard raised his hand and hit the girl on her cheek with force. She staggered from pain and surprise. Then Liu Guishen approached her. His voice was full of cold gloating. He announced that he intended to pick up the plant, and if he could not, he would play with her first and then kill him. Without hesitation, the villain rushed forward and began to tear the clothes of the unfortunate girl. But unexpectedly, at that very moment, the door swung open with a roar. Yu, who quickly traced the path of the car, burst into the concrete building. Liu Guishen turned sharply. His face was distorted in surprise. He could not even imagine that this was possible. He looked around. His lips trembled in a light grin. In this place, it seemed really fun. The bandits displeasedly paid attention to the uninvited guest and with a challenge asked who he was, hinting that he should not interfere with the young master to deal with his affairs. Zhang Xiahua looked at the young man and recognized him. At their first meeting, she paralyzed him with poisoned needles. How strange it is to see him here, alive and sound. Yiwu calmly replied that he could not stand the people who are mocking women and came only to give the bastard a chance to apologize. Liu Guishen twisted with contempt and said with anger that this miserable guy was not worthy to make himself a hero and squeezed his weapons in his hands more. Zhang Xiahua screamed in panic, begging to run. This cruel and merciless person is able to kill him in an instant. Meanwhile, several strong guys took up positions behind him, waiting for the order of their master. The young man looked coldly at Liu Guishen and stated that he had given him the opportunity to improve, but he did not use it. The bastard grinned contemptuously and gave his people an order to destroy an upstart. Because no one dares to threaten such a majestic person like him, Zhang Xiahua shouted in a broken voice, warning the hero to be careful. The enemy bandit rushed forward rapidly and waved with a knife with force. The edge of the blade passed just a few millimeters from EW. But the young man instantly reacted, grabbed the enemy's wrist and squeezed him so hard that he cried out in pain. The next second, Wu deftly knocked out the weapon out of his hands, and now he himself was in a clear advantage. With a lightweight, the boy threw several bandits, as if they were garbage bags, while he wounded them, leaving no chance of further resistance. Liu Guishen numb, he was shocked, not believing his eyes. Zhang Xiahua also froze in shock. Enjoying the triumph, boldly looked into the eyes of his enemy. The next second, the young man broke off the ground with a powerful impetus and quickly rushed forward. Approaching the enemy, Liu Guishen, like the last cowardly rat, hid Zhang Xiahua in a panic. A girl with an empty glass gaze watched what was happening. Yi Wu with contempt threw that in front of him is a miserable insignificance, which uses a woman like a shield. But suddenly the guy felt the approaching danger behind him and turned sharply. Another bandit rushed to the attack, violently delivering a powerful blow with his foot. The young man did not have time to dodge. He was thrown away by several meters. He tried to resist, but flew off at a decent distance. Now there could be no doubt. The attacked was an unusual person. It was an enlightened cultivator. Liu Guishan, realizing his obvious superiority, instantly transformed. He greeted Zhang Xian, who was supposed to teach a Wu. Zhang Xiaohua, in horror, asked the Wu to run away, because this guy was the strongest minister, Liu Guishan, and a martial artist. Zhang Qian looked with a predatory look at the enemy and licked his knife. He said that he would never miss his target, and today the young man will die. However, he looked at his enemy with anger and said that he would really like to see how he was going to kill him. The angry cultivator rushed forward, waving a magic weapon. Yi Wu watched how powerful purple energy raped around Zhang Qian. The next moment, the young man accepted the challenge and waved his weapon. The guy noticed that his opponent had prepared well, but his tricks would not be able to help him. With these words, Yi Wu inflicted a crushing blow. Zhang Xiaohua watched this in a daze, holding her breath. The girl did not take her gaze from the hero. Liu Guishan was extremely furious. Zhang Qian was surprised to note that this guy is also engaged in martial arts and is at a high level. He asked with a mockery why his enemy, if he tried to kill, is still lying on the ground. Zhang Qian rose with rage to get on the label of another blow. Now the cultivator understood that he had made a mistake by underestimating the enemy. The next moment, he waved a deft movement. While his opponent did not manage to turn around, there was a powerful blow, and for a moment the clothes of Zhang Xian froze in the air. The bandit fell to the ground. A puddle of blood spread out under it, essaying from the wound. Zhang Qian could not believe that this was possible, because he was very strong and incredibly significant in these places. Liu Guishan trembled out of fear, and could not believe that his minister, on whom he had such hopes, died overnight. Yi Wu turned to the young master and said that now his turn had to die. However, the cowardly Liu Guishan fell to his knees in front of the guy and began to beg for mercy. He began to beat himself on his cheeks and said that he deserves death, because he had to hunt for the plant and abduct Zhang Xiaohua. Yi Wu brought a knife over the criminal's head. This moment was incredibly tense. The guy's eyes sparkled with anger. The young man struck, but Liu Guishan closed his hand and was severely wounded. It was cold-blooded that the cut hand is the price for the abduction, and now the bandit should leave the path. Liu Guishan turned around and, staggering, wandered away and could not believe that he was alive. And the hero looked after him with contempt. Yi Wu turned to a saved girl and said that now she is safe. The guy introduced himself. His name is Echino, but the young beauty could be called just a classmate E. The girl was embarrassed, remembering their first meeting. But the young man said that everything was fine. He really went to the wrong toilet, but do not worry. At first, the guy wanted to demand an explanation, but given the circumstances, it is better not to remember this. Suddenly, the door opened with a loud roar, and a huge truck crashed into the room. He was alerted and looked at the car that suddenly appeared for a few moments. Everything happened very quickly. The car ran into Yi Wu, which did not have time to bounce to the side. Zhang Xiaohua watched this with horror. For a few moments, she froze from shock. A woman fell out of the cab and hit the cement painfully. A rude voice came from the inside. A guy named Lin Kun and said that if someone does not get treasures, he will certainly die today. Yi Wu rose to his feet, trying to recover after the shock. The guy tried to make out who was so blind that he knocked him down. The unfortunate lady pointed to Yi Wu and stated that this guy stole a treasure from the tomb. The young man squeezed his teeth with rage. Again, this impudent company stood in his way. Lin Kun and arrogantly asked how the young man did not die after such a blow and survived. Zhang Xiaohua approached the guy and asked how he feels. He was replied that he had broken his left hand and was in a slight numbness. Zhang Xiaohua said that this can be fixed because she has several silver needles. Stuck them at certain points, you can conduct treatment. Yi Wu answered that everything was in order. He has healing pills that will help him. The guy took out a magic pill and tried to swallow it, but suddenly Lin Kun and waved a knife at him. Noticing that his opponent was not paying attention to him at all, Lin Kun was indignant. Not only was he not going to give a treasure, but he also intends to heal. However, the young man contemptuously stated that he was not going to give anything to anyone. This treasure belongs to him. Lin Kun and materialized a lot of sharp knives around him, smiled at a predatory smile and said that then he would take the artifact himself. The next moment, A Wu and Jiang Xiaohua were alarming at the approaching blades. The young man covered a classmate and ordered her to be careful. Yi Wu pushed his girlfriend back, obscuring her from impending danger. In the next instant, the knives pierced the stone wall and crashed into it with a loud roar. A powerful explosion was heard. He did not stop covering the frightened Jiang Xiahua. Lin Kun, and with maliciousness, noticed that there are things that you can't just take and use for their own purposes. With despair, I realized that due to the injury I could not use its strength at full power. Meanwhile, the enemy was already rapidly approaching, smiling more predatorily every second. Lin Kun and said that this is the last chance. If he does not give ancient texts and the sword will very much regret it. But the next moment, the events accepted an even more serious turn. Jiang Xiahua entered into a fight, grabbing a heavy stick. The girl waved force and shouted so that the villain immediately left her friend alone. Lin Kun and felt a powerful blow, from which his mind was clouded for a moment. He turned around in a rage. Did this girl dare to hit him? But now she has attracted even greater aggression. The bastard grabbed the knife, intending to injure Jiang Xiahua, a girl who did not expect such a reaction. Tried to protect herself with a stick, but at that moment he entered the battle, easily blocking the enemy's blow with a magic sword. The guy grinned and said that it was this treasure that is so eager to get a skeleton of Kun, and he can try to take it if he could. The bastard held out his hand and said that if his prey was so close, he would definitely not retreat. However, the next moment, a powerful electric current was discharged from the sword. He mockingly asked that the enemy thought that everything would be so simple. Electric discharges completely covered the body of Lin Kun, and the enemy with annoyance realized that he had miscalculated. Meanwhile, A Wu was about to destroy the enemy, but suddenly dozens of sharp daggers flew into him. The young hero built a shield around him, reflecting the attack. But the defense turned out to be imperfect. At some point, one of the blows reached the goal. Suddenly, another participant entered the battle, a spiritual evil snake. He attacked A Wu, and the young man flew off the wall with a roar, starting to choke. He often coughed. Lin Kun, and with obvious gloating, said that he suggested that his opponent was strong enough. But in fact, everything turned out to be only a cheap performance. How stupidly the life of the Wu. With these words, the bastard approached the sword, intending to take him to himself. Lin Kun and took the weapon in his hands and felt his magical power. He swung and stated that it was time to send the enemy to hell. But the next moment, Yi Wu deftly dodged the attack, slipping close to the enemy, and caught the coveted pill. The young man swallowed her. Only healing power could help him recover. Meanwhile, Lin Kun swung again. He said that this sword, a real treasure, and garbage like Yi Wu is not worthy to hold it in his hands. However, unexpectedly, he easily blocked the blow. He grabbed the blade with his bare hands and at the same time did not receive a single wound. The young man grinned and said that he was simply weakened. Did Lin Kun really think he could kill him? The next moment, A Wu with a sharp movement hit the enemy with his foot, forcing him to back. When the enemy tried to escape, he mockingly asked if he would really leave in such a cowardly way. However, Lin Kun failed to escape far. He was caught up by a bright ray released by a guy. Jiang Xiahua in fear covered her face with her hands. What to do now? There are so many corpses. Is she really worth calling the police? He grabbed his head. He spent too much spiritual energy, and now his head was unbearably ill. The young girl hurried to him, trying to support and at least somehow alleviate his condition. Jiang Xiahua desperately realized that her silver needles were over. Then she decided to call an ambulance. She dialed the right number and said that the victim was next to her. Half an hour passed, the ambulance crew rushed through the streets, not ceasing to signal. Jiang Xiahua looked at the guy with despair, mentally begging him not to leave her alone. The nurses informed the girl that the head physician is now in intensive care and you need to wait a bit. Jiang Xiahua checked the pulse of a friend. He was stable. It seems that the guy simply lost consciousness. Suddenly, the doctors noticed the patient who walked along the corridor and suddenly fainted. They hurried to his aid. Jiang Xiahua decided to take silver needles from the Chinese medical department, hoping that with their help, she would be able to save the guy. At this time, he opened his eyes. His head was still split with tension, and his gaze was muddy. The young man rose from his seat, trying to remember how he ended up here, and was surprised to find that he was in the hospital. Yi Wu decided that he needed to get to the spiritual mine as soon as possible to restore energy. Otherwise, he would lose consciousness again. Meanwhile, In a large multi-story building, a billboard hung nearby with the image of a young fair-haired young man. A subordinate came up to him and said that everything was almost ready. Drinking tea. The young man asked what with the actors. The heater was a little taken aback, pondering the answer. He did not know what to say. The boss looked angrily at him. The subordinate was too stupid if he forgot the most important, because they arranged a show to promote the goods, and actors were required to help create the illusion of the divine doctor. The man nodded and said that he realized. Then he went to settle everything and do as the boss ordered. Half an hour passed. The man gathered his subordinates in costumes and said that there would be a double fee for this performance, so you need to give all the best. Meanwhile, he, bent over, went to the exit from the hospital. He barely moved his legs, feeling strong weakness. At some point, the young man did not calculate his balance and almost fell on a taken-aback man. The bandit was confused. He decided that this is one of the actors who plays too realistic, and thought that he needed work. Having thought a little, the man grabbed the guy and threw him into the truck. This kid plays well, even fainted without leaving the image. You need to go to the show, he said. A minute later, the car started up and hit the road on a deserted highway. Meanwhile, Jiang Xiahua, having mined silver needles, returned to the bed where her friend lay. However, the girl was very surprised. Finding that the place was empty, it was very strange. At that time, a crowd of people gathered near the large building. Today, Dr. Shui should have demonstrated his methods of treatment live, and for each viewer, it was an important event. People took places in an impatient expectation of the appearance of an outstanding doctor. The subordinate stated that he found the best actors. Among them, one who played extremely realistically stood out. The next moment, a man went on stage, took a microphone and asked the audience to calm down. He announced that the show of the Divine Doctor begins right now, and everyone could see a miracle. After these words, the presenter solemnly announced the arrival of Dr. Xue Zhenya himself. The crowd enthusiastically greeted the young and talented doctor with applause. Zhu stood for the rack and expressed gratitude for the support. He noted that medical workers should be compassionate and wise, because their work save lives and heal the wounded. Without further ado, he said that you can start this exciting sight. With these words, the man effectively threw back the red scarf, which, wriggling in the wind, fell smoothly down. On a special stand lay silver needles belonging to the Biana Zue family. It was a rare treasure. He explained that he used medical techniques to restore and reproduce these silver needles. The audience was delighted. He added that these needles can benefit many people. Now it is not 998 and not 888. The price is lower than ever, only 88, and anyone can acquire this rare treasure, he announced. One of the viewers arrogantly asked if this was just an advertising trick. He expressed doubt that the needles really work. Zhu confidently stated that there was no doubt about this and gave a sign to the subordinate to bring the first patient. The next moment, they were taken to the stage, which was still lying unconscious. The doctor said that they have a seriously ill patient, and now he uses acupuncture needles to cure him, demonstrating the miraculous properties of the product. Zhu slowly picked up one of the needles. She was incredibly sharp and exuded a soft silver glow. Suddenly, a magical artifact, which was in the doctor's pocket, shone with bright light. However, Zhu did not suspect anything and intended to bring the ritual to the end. But unexpectedly, he woke up and opened his eyes, looking puzzled in front of him. The doctor was indignant and could not understand what was wrong with this actor and why he woke up ahead of time. In the meantime, he looked around puzzled, unable to understand where he received spiritual energy. But the next moment, the guy realized that in the pocket of Xue, there was a mysterious object that gave him strength. Xue hissed with rage, but, not understanding what was happening, ordered the young man to continue his game and not show amateur performances. Otherwise, he would not receive money. Yiwu suddenly realized what was happening here and smiled slyly, deciding to use the situation in his favor. The young man said that he did not need money, but wants to pick up the jade pendant, which is in the doctor's pocket. Otherwise, he would get up, and everyone present would understand that this is just a production. Frightened, Xue agreed, since he had no way out. Yiwu happily threw his head back and smiled pretty, pleased with his ingenuity. Zhu ordered the young man to lie down and behave quietly, as if he was still unconscious. When the needle touched the body of Yiwu, he jumped with lightning speed, and his body started. People in the hall enthusiastically applauded. The doctor is really a miracle worker, since with the help of a needle he creates such incredible things. He, adhering to the sore side, complained that the doctor was too cruel. but Zhui said coldly that this was the price for his generic jade pendant. When it ended, Zhui said that the pendant is on the second floor and they should sign an agreement. 10 minutes passed. He was impatiently asked when he could get his award, but the doctor smiled ominously and stated that they did not agree so. Feeling something was amiss, the young man asked what SE was talking about, because they had a clear agreement. However, the doctor noticed that the guy was simply trying to take advantage of the situation and steal his jade pendant. But this is impossible. He-woo with contempt stated that Su was simply a miserable fraudster. Besides, he did not let him disgrace before the public, and he refuses to fulfill his promise. Wu saw that the young man looks very decisively and was approaching him. In a panic, the doctor called and knew his guard who could help him. The next moment, a strong guy with a club burst into the room and confidently stated that he had arrived. Yi-woo calmly watched how these thugs surround him from all sides. Zhu smugly said that now the young man should be scary, but suddenly, he extended his hand in front of him. Sui was taken aback by surprise. The next moment, the young man hit the doctor with force, so he flew off and fell to the floor. Shu, crumbling with pain, ordered the subordinate to grab the impudent and teach him. Yes, Nu said loudly that he would definitely catch this wretch and make him apologize. He waved a heavy club, but the next moment missed. Yi-woo hit the enemy with his fist and said that it was better to give the doctor a jade in a good way. Soon he grabbed several more bandits who looked at him in horror. Yi-woo ruthlessly held them by the scruff of the scruff, squeezing their clothes with force and not letting go of his hands. The guy scattered enemies as unnecessary garbage and warned that they would no longer be confused under his feet. Zhu in horror watched what was happening. His guards were silently lying on the floor. It turned out that this actor was not at all simple. The doctor trembled with fear and pressed against the wall, and Awu slowly approached him. The guy said that he was asking for the last time whether he would give a pendant or not. The unfortunate Zhuo, with trembling hands, extended a jewelry emitting magical energy. Yi-woo with anger grabbed the jade and with a grin, noticed that Yue was behaving like a stubborn donkey. The young man turned and headed for the exit, finally saying that a miserable fraudster had already sold many fakes, deceiving people. Soon the guy arrived at the University of Haizhou. After so much time, he finally returned to his native walls. Zhang Jiven was happy to greet a classmate, but looked alarmed. He said that recently there was a check at the school, and Yiwu has not attended classes for a long time, so you should be careful. But the next moment, Zhang Jiven noticed that the guy was sitting in a meditative pose. The guy fell on the desk and said that in this case he would also rest and would not make noise. He understood that this jade pendant collects a lot of aura, ideally suitable for the cultivation of his clairvoyance. The young man looked in front of him and saw several people. An elderly teacher, Old Jin, said that there were valuable things underground, and they concluded a good construction contract. Last time, a fragment of a stone plate was dug up at this place, on which the task of 10,000 treasures was written. The name sounded like a good product. Yiwu closed his eyes and in confusion repeated these words. The task of 10,000 treasures. The next moment, Zhang Jiven with horror discovered that his friend had disappeared from his chair. It was unexpected. He sat discouraged on the floor for several moments and could not understand what was happening. The student looked around in confusion, but the trace of the friend had already disappeared. Meanwhile, Yi-woo with all his feet ran to the construction site. Now the guy realized what was really happening. The task is 10,000 treasures. This is the legacy of the sect of Qing Yun. Is it really here? Suddenly, Yi-woo heard a formidable cry next to him. The guy should not be in this place. The guys who approached him thought that this young man was simply trying to earn extra money here. Recently, the economy has been leaving the best, and many come here in search of work. He did not argue and agreed with it. The man patted the new one on the shoulder and said that if he was suitable, after the trial period he would be credited to work. But suddenly the door banged loudly. This sound was so rare that the man turned around. Judging by the sound, an accident has just occurred, and one of the employees was in danger. It was necessary to flee to the scene as soon as possible. I received a message that he should also follow them. The builders approached a huge pit. This place is so dangerous that he was overwhelmed. Similar happened the last time, then several people died. Another gentleman arrived at the scene and asked all those present to part. Old Jin also slowly approached. The man fearlessly approached the very edge, but the guys asked the boss to be careful. However, Old Jin said that no one would suit. He himself will find out the situation below and inform about it. In the hands of the old man was an ancient device that showed the level of energy and spiritual power. An elderly man stated, "The green dragon took his place. The white tiger went down from the mountains. This place has powerful spiritual energy. His minister approached and asked how things were going, whether there are traces of blood. The old man replied that there are a lot of them here. The guy smiled gloatingly. It was good news. He was glad that he could finally get wealth. The guy called Lin. Old Jin informed him that he needed to find a group of workers and send them to intelligence. For this should be collected as many people as possible. The bandit said that he would prepare cannon meat in the best possible way. Soon, a sufficient army gathered. At the head stood a guy who said that in a collapsed crypt, full of treasures, and the authorities were asking people to go down there. Anyone could sign up. Many builders readily volunteered to go to the mine in search of treasures. Yiwu also expressed a desire to help. The guy had his own motives and hidden benefits. The team leader said that in this case it is necessary to prepare. Everyone can go down to the mine. The contractor told Linnea that he had already gained the right number of people. The guy replied that this was excellent. The villain said that everyone can go down with him, but care must be observed. The guys were glad. They believed that, having made their way into the cave, they would find treasures and finally get rich. After a moment, they went down, stepping on a cold, rocky floor. Lin noticed that this place is quite spacious, not at all like a cemetery. He thought to himself that in this place spiritual energy is much stronger than outside. Perhaps there is a mine here. Suddenly, a huge and luxurious building appeared ahead, completely not fit into the gloomy surroundings. Lin exclaimed in surprise. It looks like the palace. It is simply incredible that they managed to find such a building. The builders with joy and admiration screamed that this place is an ancient relic, and the treasures must be hidden in these ruins. The guys rushed forward with enthusiasm. Everyone intended to be the first to get inside and take as many jewelry as possible. He was in no hurry to follow them. The guy thoughtfully noticed that such an architectural style is very similar to the one that was 2,000 years ago. Perhaps there really is a tower of thousands of treasures. Meanwhile, the builders already made their way inside and sorted out the stones with enthusiasm, rejoicing that they would really get rich. But suddenly, something went wrong. The earth underfoot sharply began to tremble, and the people who were indoors could hardly resist. The contractor was very surprised and could not understand what was happening. Did the building really collapse again? Suddenly, a translucent figure appeared before amazed people, who asked who dared to invade the shower hall. He, who at that time hid behind the stone, intending to go unnoticed, saw that in front of him, a millennial soul. Lin was also surprised. The guy asked himself if he did not seem to him and the ancient spirits still exist in this place. The builders quickly ran away. They were in a panic because they faced a real ghost, from which it was not clear what to expect. However, several more ghosts that appeared directly from nowhere and stated that any offender would be sentenced to death were blocked by the worried people. The next moment, ghostly perfumes used a magic attack, which went directly to the builders. The brigadier in a daze called Lin. The man was confused and did not know what to do. Lin did not lose his composure. With a satisfied smile, he applied magical abilities, and he released many knives, rushing forward, completely confident in success. Sharp blades pierced the bodies of spirits, forcing them to cry out from surprise. Translucent flesh still succumbed to the onslaught. The contractor was delighted if Mr. Lin was taken for business. Everything always goes according to plan. The perfumes looked at each other. A cultivator, a worthy opponent, clearly stood in front of them. Lin released a new portion of knives. If these perfumes survived for 10,000 years, then they probably know where the tower is thousands of treasures, in which case he decided to interrogate one of them. However, in response, the powerful spirit released a fiery dragon. The monster rushed right on the line, and he was numb with fear of an impending threat. The fiery beast released a stream of powerful energy, which made the man shudder. He flew to the side and crashed into the wall with a roar. The blow was too strong so that he could resist. The guy crashed right into the stone behind which he was hiding. The young man carefully looked out. Meanwhile, the ghost resolutely stated that this was their territory and the violators would be destroyed. Lin, swearing, rose to his feet, feeling an incredible surge of aggression. Noticing next to the Wu, the villain decided to use it as a shield from the next blow. The ghost swung a weapon. The violator must be destroyed. The blow fell right into the body of Yiwu. The guy for a moment was numb and screamed in pain. Lin took advantage of the moment and quickly fled. Everything is over. Here, not only perfumes, but also their powerful cultivation. Fortunately, he managed to find a scapegoat. Suddenly, the guy turned around and saw that Yiwu began to move. Instead of dying, the hero got up calmly, looking quite healthy. The young man angrily asked the ghost whether he really likes to beat people. They stood on the floor, around the magic circle, sparkling with bright red light. Suddenly, drops, incredibly sharp needles began to drip from the ceiling. This attack could cut the spirit into many small parts, which was very surprising. The next moment, a powerful explosion was heard. He was calmly observed what was happening. Lin could not believe his eyes. As possible. This guy is incredibly strong. However, this incident did not leave indifferent the other ghosts. They longed to avenge her older brother. One of them caused an evil python who hissed and protected the poisonous tongue. Looking for a victim, Yiwu squeezed a magic lamp in his hands, sealing his souls. With its help, he could avoid this attack. The young man activated the technique of binding the soul, and at the same moment the strong chains burst out. The mighty python, who intended to destroy him, could not resist this power and was captured. The ghosts realized that the matter was bad. This lamp could seal souls, and they did not have protection against it. The only thing that remained was to hide as soon as possible to save your life. But the spirits did not have time. As soon as they rushed to the exit, the pink chains overtook them and captured them. The unfortunate victims twitched, but it was impossible to get out. The contractor realized that this guy, a master of martial arts, was strange that he passed himself as a simple builder. He was holding a lamp in his hands, and voices were heard around discussing his strength. Even they did not suspect this before. Lin cleared his throat and approached, although it was difficult to admit it. But the young man managed well. The guy decided not to take a break and tried to get out. He turned to Yiwu and suggested that he was probably from the Shan Shan sect. He explained his behavior with the desire to check the young man, because he was watching him for a long time. He smiled good-naturedly and thanked for the opportunity. Inwardly, he rejoiced. Lin did not even guess who he was actually, which means that the disguise works. The builders decided that Mr. Lin has incredible insight. If not for him, they would have died. Yiwu suspiciously noted that he was surrounded by a crowd of sinks, but he said nothing aloud. Lin stopped talking and announced that he should not waste time. There should be many treasures inside, and you need to continue the search. At that moment, he noticed an amazing figure that seemed out of nowhere. It was a surviving spirit who quietly tried to hide, crawling to the exit. Lin with contempt pressed him to the ground, while the rest parted in search of treasures. The guy approached the prisoner and noted that he has incredible talent and is clearly not easy. Lin demanded that the spirit tell where the tower is thousands of treasures. Yi, who passed by, heard this conversation and involuntarily listened. He was also interested in this tower. The ghost with contempt spat Linya in the face and stated that he would not say anything. The villain swung, because the neglect of the ghost greatly angered him, and stated that he deserves death. However, the spirit only grinned and replied that even if he died, he would take someone else with him. The next moment, there was a powerful explosion. Lin instantly flew away, instinctively trying to save his life. He hit the ground heavily, painfully knocking on the stone floor. The foreman in a daze looked at the guy who fell in front of him, clearly surprised by what was happening. The man hastened to help Lin arise and asked if everything was in order with him. The guy dismissed nervously and said in irritation that nothing bad could happen to him. Suddenly, something amazing appeared ahead, and Lin, like the rest, stared at this phenomenon with amazement. Yiwu also approached. The young man understood what was happening here. An unusual phenomenon made everyone be alert. The guy felt strong, spiritual energy emitting powerful vibrations. Lin ordered the builders to leave things and follow him inside. The team leader turned to the workers, saying that if they did not want to die, they should follow him. After short hesitation, the builders still agreed. There was no longer back. Hurrying their breath, they went into the unknown, starting from the ground and jumping up. When everyone made his way inside, a mountain cave opened in front of them, in which diamonds stuck out from under the ground. Yiwu now understood that this place, the Mine of Spirits, had everything into place. The rest of the guys looked at each other, amazed at the discovery. None of them suspected the existence of such a place. Lin sharply gave a slap to the contractor and ordered him to go forward to scout the situation. The man turned pale. It was incredibly dangerous, and fear constrained him. However, Lin was not even going to listen to objections and ordered his subordinate to go without unnecessary conversations. The unfortunate foreman, having stumbled, fell to the ground, next to the scattering of diamonds, grown into stone. Looking around, he prayed quietly, hoping that there was no danger in his path. Soon, the employee turned around and told Lin that everything was clean and there were no threats ahead. But he did not notice how an ominous shadow, a formidable wild leopard appeared behind. In the next instant, the beast quickly jumped and grabbed his victim with force. The only thing the foreman managed to do was scream loudly. Builders and Lin froze in horror, unable to believe their eyes. At the same moment, the guys rushed to run, not wanting to face the monster. Meanwhile, the huge leopard growled, and the workers desperately tried to hide. However, one of them failed to escape quickly enough. The beast caught up with him. The leopard gathered a powerful cloud of energy near him, emitting dazzling light. This energy lump rushed towards running people, forcing them in a panic, rushing in different directions. But soon energy overtook them, and from the blow they soared into the air. Lin trembled with fear. This place was completely unpredictable. Even spiritual animals lived here. Meanwhile, the leopard menacingly stated that anyone who invades its territory should die. Lin grabbed the weapon, trying to look belligerent, and said loudly that he was not afraid of attacks. But the powerful beast only grinned and rushed forward with a growl. Lin got colder with fear. He could not believe that this was possible. The beast was rapidly approaching, and it seemed that the death was inevitable. The next moment, the leopard clung to the man's hand, squeezing it in powerful jaws. It was simply incredible. Lin in horror watched what was happening. His eyes widened with fear. He desperately called to the rescue, hoping that one of the workers would hear him. He slowly removed the paint from his face, finally revealing the true personality. Did this bastard still have not recognized him, and so brazenly asked for help? Lin recoiled in horror. This meeting was completely unexpected for him. He did not think that fate would reduce them again. With a cold smile, he noticed that his opponent could no longer hide. Lin, in a daze, looked at his enemy. It was unthinkable. The next instant, the villain rushed to run, hoping to save his life. He was squeezing a sharp sword in his hands and looked after the runer with a predatory smile. Lin heard a strange noise behind him. The guy turned around, hoping that the chase only faded him. But the next instant, his sword struck overtaken. The pain pierced the body, forcing him to shudder. Lin fell to the ground, no longer showing signs of life. He was killed. The leopard could not believe his eyes. These two were seriously quarreled, and one of them was stronger. Yiwu noticed that becoming a spiritual beast in such a place is really talent. The leopard with contempt stated that no persuasion would force him to spare an ordinary person. This is his territory, and there is no forgiveness here. However, in the body of there was a powerful spiritual energy that could come in handy. The leopard decided to leave him alive. The guy noted that the beast remains a beast, wild and ignorant. While he significantly looked at his enemy, the young man suggested an alternative instead of a senseless battle to death. Conclude a deal that is beneficial to both. The leopard was alert and asked what exactly he had in mind. Yiwu explained what could share energy, but in return wants to get information. The leopard snorted contemptuously, saying that insignificant people have no right to negotiate with him. The beast became angry and rushed forward, saying that he deserves death for such audacity. But the young man concentrated his strength and replied that if a leopard does not want to negotiate, then he will have to fight. The next moment, the beast felt a powerful pressure that made him freeze and think, nagging before this amazing guy. The leopard apologized for his mistake. Yiwu softened, smiled, and said that now they can continue the constructive dialogue. The beast, with a trembling voice, said that until the young man would kill him, he was ready to talk to him about anything. I was serious. He asked the only question whether there is a tower of thousands of treasures here. The leopard asked in surprise, slowed down and thought for a few seconds. The guy instantly set the sword to his throat and warned that he would not tolerate the tricks. He needed the truth. The frightened leopard hastily replied that the tower really exists. He indicated the direction and said that she should be there, although he himself was extremely confused. Yiwu immediately hit the road, warning that it was better not to try to deceive the beast. After some time, the young man was in the right place. Brick walls towered in front of him, exuding blue energy. He was frowning. Was it really a joke? The Tower of Thousands of Treasures? This is an ancient structure, and in front of him is just a pile of strange bricks. The leopard explained that the blue bricks are burned during the construction of this very tower. When Yiwu irritably noticed that he was looking for not broken bricks, the beast explained. People once dug the spiritual mines here, burned the materials obtained and used them for construction. Where the tower itself is now is unknown. Getting angry, the young man said that this useless beast did not bring any benefit and decided to kill him. But, looking at the jade pendant, he changed his mind. Even if it was not possible to find the Tower of Thousands of Treasures, This place will still bring him benefit. The guy decided to pick up all the spiritual energy that accumulated here. The leopard was surprised to think that this hero has an unusually powerful vessel that could instantly absorb energy. Meanwhile, the young man raised his hand and said that jewelry, albeit vulgars, is of great benefit. The leopard bowed to him and asked him to take him with him. Life here depends on spiritual energy, and if he takes it, the beast is doomed. He agreed. In the end, a good companion could have a King Lviv. Meanwhile, old Jin was looking forward to the construction site. He did not understand why everything was so dragging on, and began to suspect that something serious happened. Suddenly, the man turned around and saw in front of him something from which he was trembling. He, appearing on the spot, waved his hand and said that he had got out of the mine. He said that he was a temporary worker at this construction site and, like everyone else, completed tasks. Old Jin asked where the rest of the workers were located. Not a single soul was visible around. After a short pause, the young man replied that everyone was killed. No one survived. These words shocked an elderly man. His eyes widened in surprise. His mouth opened. With a sigh, he added that many monsters appeared in the mine. The workers gave their lives to protect it. With these words, he stated that he was going to leave and defiantly strode further. Old Jin looked incredulously at the guy. It was obvious that he decided to circle him around his finger. A moment later, the elderly master raised his hand, which turned lightly into huge and sharp claws. He has already set off. And behind him, old Jin shouted so that the guy would not try to deceive him because he is too young. With these words, the old man swung, and Wu, not having time to react in time, fell to the ground. The young man turned around, contempt, a mixture of anger and rage that he only had. The man said that he should not deceive him. He is not so good as to do this. He must tell what happened in reality. Suddenly, the guy smiled. Now it is clear that the old man has information about the Tower of Thousands of Treasures, so it is better to pretend to be weak to find out everything. He asked to spare him and promised to tell everything when they went inside. They found many values, but also collided with spirits and monsters. Mr. Lin died at the hands of monsters. Old Jin asked, "Is it all? But what about other treasures, for example? Information about the Tower of Thousands of Treasures." The young man said that he remembered there really were bricks from this tower, but the building itself disappeared. This news surprised the old man. It was difficult to imagine that this was possible. He looked with an imploring glance at old Jin and said that he did not know what a tower is, thousands of treasures, and why it is needed. Having thought a little, the old man said that if the guy dies anyway, then you can tell him. Many years ago, the Banshan sect found a monument to the Qing Yun sect, where thousands of treasures were mentioned. Rumors went that rare cultivation techniques were stored in it. If it could be found, it would be an invaluable find. Wu rose and asked if there were other tips about the Tower of Thousands of Treasures. Old Jin, with indignation, asked what this guy was doing, how he dared to get up without permission. However, the young man smiled and said that he wanted to get more information. But the old man said only obvious nonsense. Old Jin again released his huge hand and said that he would not tolerate such ridicule. The man said that the guy seemed to really decide to finish his life today because he behaves too boldly. He, without saying a word, picked up a sword that radiated magical impulses. The fight began. Old Jin looked at the young man with rage, clasping his teeth. He said that he allowed the old man to boast a little. Did he really think that he has the right to boast of such worthless power? The next moment, old Jin, under the influence of a powerful blow, flew to the side. The man collapsed to the ground, painfully hitting his hard stone with his back. With a cold grin, quickly headed for the master, waving weapons. He brought the sword closer to the old man's throat and said that he could still be useful. If he is ready to obey, he could save his life. The guy said that he was from Qing Yun and sternly looked at an elderly man. Old Jin could not believe his eyes. It was impossible. The Qing Yun school has long ceased to exist. He said that he did not intend to explain anything. If the old man is ready to continue the investigation of rumors about the Tower of Thousands of Treasures, he will receive a chance for mercy, Jin agreed with a trembling voice. The guy ordered the master to open his mouth wider. He looked at him anxiously, not understanding what the young man planned. Meanwhile, Wu left the old man a pill with amazing properties. Old Jin greeted with fear and asked what kind of potion it was. The guy replied that this is a poison that acts every 10 days. He has an antidote. If the old man is obedient and does not try to deceive him, he could get it. Wu thoughtfully noted to himself that it was really dangerous today. He spent a lot of energy, but fortunately, everything worked out. Suddenly, The young man felt a treacherous rumbling in his stomach. It was time to make a break. Yiwu decided that he needed to quickly find a place where you can settle problems with the stomach. The guy went to the thicket, but suddenly something alerted him, and he turned around in surprise. The next moment, his gaze became even more wary. He saw something unexpected. Zhang Yahua sat on the ground, who called loudly to the aid, because this pervert appeared in front of her again. The girl threw him back with force, covering her eyes with her hand so as not to see this shame. Zhang Xiahua said that she had made so much effort to find him, and he was looking behind her again. The guy tried to explain that this was a simple misunderstanding. Yiwu, with a good-natured smile, asked why the girl was in this place. However, the young lady turned away and said that if she had not been worried about his life, she would not ask people all the way. The young man pleaded his guilt and offered to compensate for everything by buying her food or something else. The girl stared in surprise at the guy where he got that kind of money. All this looked suspicious. He showed the jewelry that he found in the mine and said that this would be enough. Zhang Xiahua could not restrain emotions. Did this guy go crazy? He owns a bunch of gold. The young man good-naturedly invited her to choose the decoration that she likes. The girl really liked this idea. Zhang Xiahua laughed merrily and said that then he would gladly accept his gift. She chose a bracelet that was on his left hand. All this seemed incredible. The girl just wanted to joke, but the guy really gave her everything she wanted. Yiwu suggested that she go together to sell the things found. However, the guy did not tell where he got all these things, and he answered all the questions that I should not ask so much. Soon, the young man, along with his companion, arrived in a small shop where jewelry was taken. Yiwu thought that in this era, the antiques are very popular, and now it is worth getting such things. The buyer was really interested. The man was surprised to look at the stone. This thing was so unique that he even exceeded the value of treasures in his store. However, these young people did not impress serious and ambitious people, so one could try to bring down the price. The old man with disappointment put the stone on the table and, with a sigh, said he was very sorry. Although the thing is in good condition, it is not too old and therefore is not of great value. He looked at the merchant with distrust because 2,000 years ago this was a very decent term. The young man took the stone in his hands and said that in this case they would go to another place. The old man immediately perked up and hastened to say that one should not rush with such decisions. Yiwu, with a slight smile, turned around. Did the merchant still decide to buy a thing that he had just called not too ancient? The man tried to explain that he should not be understood incorrectly. He just wanted to bring down the price, but really intends to purchase a stone. Having thought a little, the merchant said that he was ready to offer 5 million. In his opinion, this is quite enough. However, he immediately corrected him, saying that they were satisfied with only the amount of 50 million. The merchant looked extremely discouraged. Such an amount clearly did not fit in his head. The young man was about to leave, saying that if the old man did not agree, they would find another shop. But he immediately stated that he agreed to buy a stone. Yiwu clarified that he would transmit the stone as soon as he receives money, and not otherwise. The old man did not object, and handed the check for 50 million. This deal was definitely worth it. Zhang Xiahua was surprised to observe what was happening, to go crazy as possible, because 50 million, this is a huge amount. Soon, the guys went away. He proposed to go somewhere and to celebrate a successful deal properly. Meanwhile, the old man dialed the number and informed his boss that he had just caught large fish, and probably these young people have still good things. Some time passed, a taxi rushed along the street. It was already dark around and the road was almost empty. Zhang Xiahua wanted to know her classmate closer and asked where he was. The guy evasively replied that he was from a rich family. In general, this was not entirely true, but the young man did not want to go into details and explain complex things. Meanwhile, another car appeared on the road, which raced at high speed, intending to overtake all the cars. The driver was noticeably nervous, squeezing the steering wheel with force and demanding that everyone give way. He was clearly late for an important technique. Suddenly, something went wrong. The wheel gave a crack, and a loud click rang out. This was not enough. The driver sharply rang out to the side of the road and gritted his teeth with angrily. The car moved along an uncontrolled trajectory, and the collision seemed inevitable. Yiwu noticed this with lateral vision and immediately realized what was happening behind them. Without hesitation, the young man grabbed Zhang Xiahua, intending to protect her from impending danger. The next moment, a collision occurred. Smoke rose up and enveloped the surroundings. The driver with anger went out into the street. His car, which he only recently bought, almost crashed. In the meantime, he asked her friend how she feels. The The girl replied that everything was in order. The angry type went to the taxi driver and demanded that he immediately go out for a showdown. The taxi driver tried to explain that there was a solid line and it was impossible to change the lane. However, an angry guy did not listen to him and hit his slap in the face with force. The guy demanded that the unfortunate driver compensate his losses because the car is now unsuitable. When the taxi driver said that he had no money, the villain clenched his fist and intended to hit him. Suddenly, Wu, who grabbed his hand, struggled his hand, suppressing the blow. The scoundrel looked at him perplexedly and asked who he was and why he intervenes in their disassembly. Wu calmly replied that it was the driver who behaved recklessly, and now he demands that others compensate for his damage. The angry type again waved his fist, intending to hit the Wu. His eyes burned with rage. However, when the enemy tried to strike, he could not do this, since he was under the protection of an invisible shield. The villain was stunned and could not understand what was happening. The next moment, he was surprised to find that he had disappeared. The young man was behind him, grabbed him by the shoulder and with a grin asked where he was looking. The guy collapsed to the ground, grabbing his cheek burning from the blow. His parents never beat, and some passerby dare to do this. The next moment, the bastard pulled out a knife from his pocket, which he always kept with him. The enemy sharply grabbed him and instructed him on the Wu, saying that he would not forgive him for such humiliation. However, the young man remained calm and without effort intercepted his hand in which there was a knife. This even more stunned the bastard, and he looked completely confused. Suddenly, a huge arrow with a sharp tip flew to him. Wu was surprised to turn from where the arrow could come from in such a place. The next moment, the young man deftly pushed his enemy towards the arrow. The guy received a serious wound in the back. His whole body shuddered. The impudent with a roar collapsed onto the asphalt and stopped showing signs of life. Wu told the driver of the taxi and Jiang Xiaohua to stay in place and not move. Meanwhile, a dark silhouette appeared around the corner. It was a girl who shot from a bow. Wu sharply jumped down and froze for a moment, pondering further actions. The guy looked around in confusion, trying to understand where his enemy disappeared. Jiang Xiaohua went to the young man and sternly asked if he was really connected with the bandits. The girl took his hand and dragged him to a safe place, saying that it was dangerous to be here. Soon, Jiang Xiaohua led him to a large multi-story building and went to one of the doors. She said that this was her hostel and suggested hiding here from impending danger. With a gallant smile, he asked if the girl was so worried about him. The young lady replied that he had saved her life, and this is just gratitude. Having carefully examined every corner, Jiang Xiaohua said that there is currently no danger here. She offered to go to bed, and she went to her bed. The girl graciously allowed him to get on the floor. And for convenience, you could take a blanket to sit more comfortably. The moon shone out the window, and Wu thoughtfully looked at the muffled light, silently thinking. Suddenly, Jiang Xiaohua opened her eyes and admitted that she could not fall asleep. The dream did not come. She asked if he was really lying to her all this time, and he has some secrets. The young man asked why the girl thinks so. Jiang Xiaohua replied that too much strange happened. And was she really so stupid to believe that an ordinary person can be so cool? The guy admitted that he really has a few secrets, but he cannot tell everything. Jiang Xiaohua agreed and said that everyone has their own secrets. She also has one. She admitted that she came to school for a reason. She had hidden motives, the guy thought, assuming that she just wanted to study and become a successful person. However, Jiang Xiaohua explained that the family is putting pressure on her so that she marries a person who does not love and come here to hide. Their conversation lasted for a long time, but after a while the dawn came. The guys opened their eyes and looked at each other. The gaze of the Wu was straight and wary, while Jiang Xiaohua looked bewildered. Because someone tapped the door to the door, Wu cautiously looked at the door and listened. Some man was clearly behind her. The male voice was called Jiang Xiaohua, assuring that he knew about her presence. The young lady reluctantly got up and opened the door, wondering what this guy was doing here. On the threshold stood a young man, holding a large bouquet of beautiful roses in his hands. Jiang Xiaohua once again repeated that they did not fit each other. The guy, whose name was Zhang Bin, objected that their parents had already agreed to their marriage, and therefore, they are perfect. The girl with irritation threw a bouquet to the ground and stated that she already had a guy, so she could not help him. Zhang Bin did not believe her words and said that it was a lie because she never had any boyfriend. The next moment, he went to the threshold. He pretended to meet Jiang Xiaohua and calmly asked what was happening here. Zhang Bin was furious, not believing that this woman could be with someone else. The rejected groom could not come to terms with the thought that Jiang Xiaohua really meets some kind of poverty. Meanwhile, he decided to finish the performance to the end and sank to one knee, holding out the ring of an amazed girl. A gold ring with a large ruby gleamed in an open box, and the guy with a serious look asked her hands. Jiang Xiaohua smiled. The young man quickly oriented her and helped her out, which was very nice. Jiang Bin looked in surprise at the jewel. Reuben was just huge. The guy squeezed his fists with anger. It was unbearable. He was not going to give up and was determined to prove who was the main one here.